matcha's creamy.
Best words of a podcast ever.
It really is creamy.
Justice.
Danny.
How you doing, brother?
Oh, well, we'll get into it.
Okay.
I'm doing pretty good.
I'm very excited about that. Thank you for doing this. I appreciate that. Where do you want to start? Because we had a few amazing words we exchanged right before the podcast, which is very annoying. Because
we're gonna try to relive them.
We're gonna try to relive them. Yeah.
We'll throw it in so no one knows we've rehearsed it.
Exactly. What should we start with? Actually, that would actually probably be a good entry point because it is interesting. This
smooth matcha tea.
This smooth matcha tea, but also your the tattoo you have on your forearm.
Oh, we were talking about that.
Yeah. So show the camera.
This is a rehearsed. We did talk about this over some food.
So this is a dragonfly for anybody who's listening, and the way you got it is pretty interesting. You want to tell us about how you got it?
Sure. Dragonfly on my arm. Started off, well, recently I was in Nicaragua. I have a house down there. And I went down there for a period of time to mourn. I don't know. I didn't know at the time, but I found myself in grieving, experiencing a closing chapter of my life. And I knew I was going down there by myself to experience something greater inside of me that I wasn't doing because I live in community. It's sometimes hard to have solitude in the midst of community. So I was like, I want to go down there for a month. And each week went by, I thought I was going to leave. I was like, I don't want to do it anymore. I want to go hang out with my friends. And I was like, no, dude, stay longer. You haven't learned what you got to learn. And about 3 weeks in to, just being on my back every morning, Wim Hof helped, yoga helped, and then a lot of tears. Like I remember lying on my back and I just like the idea of puddles of tears literally around my neck every single day throughout the day. I'm diving into whatever pains I may have inside of me. And it got triggered through an ending of a certain relationship, and then I took that and went deeper into myself. Like, okay, there's some things here I got to look at, and find myself in, I guess, my own little hell in paradise, because it is one of the best places to go, like surf and hang out. It's great down there. So I didn't have it off, too bad. But about 3 weeks in, my friend Brenna, she came down. She painted 2 moons on the studio. So it's Casa de dos Lunas is what the space is called now. And while she was down there, she was also going through a period of ending, a chapter of ending. So I thought it was a good place for us maybe to come together for about a week and experience these changes. I was a bit lonely too, so it was nice having a friend. There was a moment one morning where there's this dragonfly it appeared dead. And I picked the thing up and noticed it was breathing. So I put it on its front first because I wanted to see if it'd come alive. And I was like, let's put it on its back. I think this is just what it is. Just watch the breathing of whatever underneath this little skinny stomach of his or hers, or it was. Dragonfly's belly was just like contracting. You could just see the last breaths, and it was really cool to be there for that and just sit around this thing while it's seemed at the time taking its last breath. And it was very it was a beautiful picture for my own story at the time of taking these last breaths, because it felt like I was ending a certain part of me, and that was, I think, the point. So I went on top of my dojo, which is the music studio, and on top there's just an empty floor with this thatch roofing. So that was my dojo for the month. Found myself kind of in the same state, just trying to move and breathe and cry and let the thing that needs to come through me, and asking questions, but also just letting it be. And then on my return, or going back down the stairs from the dojo, we found the dragonfly to be dead. And so that night we decided to have a funeral for the dragonfly. And we talked about having one of her intentions, Brenna's intentions, coming out. She wanted to do an ending of the past, the dying of something. So I was like, cool, we're going to do this ritual together, and we're going to include the dragonfly now, as it's very significant. So on the property next to mine, which is also my property, this is a blank piece of land. We made a little hole and put dragonfly, and we put some stones and sticks and just intentions of things that we wanted to move away from and say goodbye to and even mourn over. And Brianna left the next day or two, and I wanted to go off on an adventure to hike a volcano. And there are these two volcanoes that is on this island in a place called Managua Lake. And so I got on a dirt bike and I cruised over to the lake on a ferry. And on this ferry, I met these women who were part of a ministry who were going to help the orphanages, one orphanage, I think, on the island. And we got in conversations about God, conversations about the Christian religion, conversations about religion itself, conversations about anything that we could talk about on a 45-minute ferry ride. And I always find myself saying that I'm experiencing, heaven on earth, and look around us. It's like we're kind of already there, and blah, blah, blah. And at the end of the conversation, she mentioned if she could pray for me. I was like, yeah, for sure. She's like, can I pray out loud? I was like, yeah, I don't care. As loud as you want. There's people here. It'll be cool. Pray. And she asked me what she could pray for, and I just said, but I said, I would like to have an experience with God. Whatever that means, on top of this volcano. A lot of times when I hike things in this kind of state of mind, it's me putting out a lot of energy so I can be very exhausted. By the top of this mountain, I have a bit more clarity on receiving because I'm just exhausted. That's a good way for me to clear my mind and body and everything, is the hike of a mountain, and then just say, I'm exhausted. God or whatever, speak with me, show up in any kind of way. So in a more simple form, I just said, yeah, I'd like to meet a type of God or God on this mountain, something, I'm doing this for a reason. So she said a prayer, and then I found a place to stay that night. And the next morning I went and hiked this volcano, and it was hard. It was halfway up, it's slippery, it's jungly, it's like the climate shifted completely from dry to wet. And
does it get high enough where you get like altitude sickness? Is it like 10,000 feet, or you don't know?
I want to say it's like over 6,000 to 7,000
Okay, so it's getting there.
Yeah, I don't think we get that tall thing. So you can go into it, which is cool. This was the dormant one. The other one was, there's two of them. You can see it from the top. There's two. There's one that's dormant, one that is active. And so this one's dormant. So you can go down into the middle of it, and there's a lake. It's very misty, really eerie, and a lot of life in there. So I just stripped everything off, walked out into the water, but the water's full of mud. I'm up to mud in my butt cheeks. And one step or two more steps, I'm going to get stuck. And to get out is difficult because I'm using my hands to get out. So I couldn't go as far as I wanted to. I wanted to go out in the middle and swim and stuff. But I was getting stuck. And so I guess I kind of felt like a baptism or just like a cleansing I wanted to do with the water. It felt very, very cleansing and very like my own personal ritual. And then my buddy Matty Moose, gave me some mala beads for this whole trip, just as a gift, as whatever. I tied them on this tree. And as I tied them on this tree, it was just like a place of significance. There was this dragonfly that was just sitting right on this leaf, just sharp as heck, man, like dark too, really black. Different kind of dragonfly. Usually I see a little bit of color, but this one was just like this guy knows what's up. It's a powerful dragonfly. And I just kind of giggled, thought, all right, that's what I wanted. Like, I don't need anything too crazy. Just a little dragonfly, a moment of transformation, almost a little bit of wink that everything's okay, and that this is a significant moment. As a dragonfly, I believe to be a very transformative figure and image, even in my own past. So when I got back from, not to mention the walk down from this volcano was, you ever walk down a hill to where your legs just, you don't think they can go any further, and you're just going to break?
Definitely. Walk
backwards or sideways or whatever. I was having to run just so gravity could carry me. And there was a place to eat at the bottom, so that's all I could think about is like get down there and eat a lot of food. So then I came home and stamped this as a moment of, like, I'll never be the same again. Like I'm since this moment, since these past few months, I'm a completely shifted. I'll say shifted person in terms of I've dove into my past, and all the little crevices. I won't say all of them, but a lot of little crevices and darker places in my life I've been looking at and feeling. When I say dark, I just mean hidden. I haven't looked at them in a while, and this was a moment, and still is a moment to take a peek and to replace a lot of pains and even moments of miscommunication with gratitude and affirmation. And I can feel the shift in my body just by paying a little bit more attention. So it was, this Dragonfly just marks a very important time. And plus I was like, I'm getting excited to change something up. I'm going to mark my body with a tattoo, just something.
It is that I love this story for many reasons, but one of them is kind of like there seems to be this thing in the world that it seems like it's communicating to you. Like it seems like those signs. I don't know if the world is doing it or somebody else is doing it, but some of them are like undeniably, to whomever is experiencing it, are realistic. They're like they connect to something very specific. They come at exactly the right moment, and I mean you can try and extrapolate all you want. That it's like just you're reverse engineering the whole thing and you're trying to make it match or whatever. But sometimes there's just like those signs represent such enormous shifts in our emotional perspective of things that it's kind of hard to believe that they're just haphazard. They're just like random, right? Yeah. By the way, that Dragonfly, the black one, it's was it like a bigger one, or was it? I don't remember.
It was slick. I mean,
it was slick. Like, the whole thing.
No, it was just like.
Oh, like
right out the lab. Like this guy's fresh and ready to go. Right? This guy's a warrior dragonfly. It was just like
I've never seen a black dragonfly. Usually they're kind of like these iridescent colors, right? They're like
that's what I figured, but his wing, he wasn't flying or nothing. So all I remember is just like this. It is a significant dragonfly, maybe just for the fact that it's just like black.
Yeah, it like stands out. Like it's unique.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I haven't really looked into that yet.
This is where, again, like having a Jamie, like in Joe Rogan, would be amazing. Just like somebody to look this up right now.
Somebody look it up for us.
Yeah, somebody would look it up. How do you feel that from that moment you had like a shift as far as like acceptance? Like you say, you're still going through like a certain process, but do you feel that in that moment there was an actual shift in how much you accept the terms that were given in this time, or?
The shift was ongoing shift, and the representation of this dragonfly would have been, finally I let go of what I want to let go. Even inside of myself, some limitations, some knocking down some walls that keep me from feeling and being, let's say, the next version of me. A version that I've had in my mind, just a version of freedom, and even emotional freedom, and even just a feeling inside. It's almost just by paying attention and letting myself experience myself in ways that I don't normally take the time to do. Expansion, a feeling of expansion, and a little bit more loosey-goosey, not as tied up and afraid of certain, like, even minute details of life. So learning as I'm interacting with people what I'm actually discovering about myself and what I've removed from myself, the kind of patterns I maybe used to have, or certain things I would say, and even finding myself, I would say, a bit more vulnerable and a bit more aware. I hesitate to use the word fear. I use the term fear in the sense that I'm aware of normally fear is my teacher, and that's where I tend to go. So I'm a bit more aware.
Sorry, I got to go off, but it is very interesting because you don't come across as a fear. Like, you don't seem to be concerned much in general. For me, knowing you, but you probably just either hide it really well, or you learn to basically channel it maybe in a different way. Because obviously, like everything you've done in your life, right? Your career, your personal relationships, they have a certain flavor of like being on guard, right? To some extent, because of the nature of the industry that you were in, and I don't like generally I don't get that vibe from you, which is like you're not really concerned. The only thing you told me is like sometimes you have a hard time sleeping when you wake up in the middle of the night. So that's something that comes up, you think, as a natural kind of like tendency you have that you learn how to combat, or this is something that you generally, is it something that you feel that is naturally arising in you, or this is something that acquired over time because of some things that happened to you?
Okay, the way I associate fear in my life, so far, it's been the path that I'm supposed to take. Or...
The fear part?
Fear. And the way I look at fear, in terms of why am I afraid, obviously, okay, I'm not going to jump off of this thing. It's too high. It's like logical fear, I guess. And then there's fear of unknown, fear of letting go, fear of change, fear because of all the things that I've been told to be afraid of. Thinking this way, doing these things sexually, going to these places, or saying these words. I guess in my interpretation of fear, it's just the letting go and the death, fear of death. Ultimately, that's what it, the fear of dying, whether it's physical or whether it's dying of identity. That to me, I think, is what I mean when I say fear. And then my ongoing approach of like, all right, well, I don't want fear. So if I look at the fear and go towards the fear enough, then there won't be any fear, at least fear that I'm not aware of. Obviously, logical fear is an important factor. But in my case, fear of...
whatever might happen?
I was thinking about this today, and I'll bring it up. I feel like I'm returning and also entering as a new and old state of being. And it kind of feels like, you observe a child, an untainted mind. And right before it gets manipulated into and from storytellers, or at least bogged down on certain definitions and words alone. But the awareness of the fear of how much around us is constantly trying to remove us from vulnerable state and put us into a state of limitations. So the fear I'm feeling now is the awareness of everything around me, the current state of our world, communities, relationships, wanting me to be something for them. And there's a lot of pressure inside of that. And that's my responsibility to do what I want to do in order to protect myself. But in the state of, can't we just live in a world of freedom and just be vulnerable and honest and not feel all these pressures? Like, well, yes. But I'm also feeling the reality of the world, which is not very freeing. So maybe the sense of fear I'm getting is like, oh man, I'm a bit more aware of the environment that we are being born into and continue to be born into, which also causes me to want to shift and be a part of the change where I believe there is ultimate freedom of vulnerability, honesty, expression without the threat to other people, systems.
So this is actually a really interesting point for me, the vulnerability part, right? Or all the other terms you used, which, see, they're okay, so all the stuff you're saying about being able to be vulnerable without the fear of, other people abusing that or judging you for doing this or that, right? It's kind of a hard product to export to a lot of society because those are not the rules. Like the second you hear that language, it almost associated automatically with like, oh, it's this spiritual thing, right? And I'm always thinking like, how do you talk about these things in terms that are more general, I guess, or neutral? And because so for example, this point of being able to be vulnerable, open yourself up, being true, exactly what you are inside, and express that to the world. That opens up the possibility that people will basically judge that portion of you, and if you haven't fully figured out exactly who you are, then now they're judging this half-formulated thing that you're not even sure that you're trying to express, and it becomes this entire mess, right? So authenticity, I guess, would be the kind of like the key word, right? And people who worry about that too much, they get into those infinite bundles inside themselves because they have stories on top of stories, and I'm telling this story to this group of people, I'm telling this story to this group of people, and it's not even lies. They're just concoctions of like what you think these people would like to hear, right? And I haven't known you in the earlier stages of your life, so I wonder how you look at that portion of it, which is like, how do you communicate that to people who don't live the life that you do? Because you have to admit that the life that you live is not a common life, right? You both were very successful in your domain, which not a lot of people make it big in that domain, but also you build a community around yourself of people that are very like-minded and they want similar things. So you found the people who you can help, but also people who will help you grow into who you're trying to become. So how do you have a conversation with someone who's not necessarily, like you were just telling me that you kind of like now slowly start doing a little bit of dating, a little bit more like normal meeting of people, right?
Yeah.
So how do you feel that does it transport? Like, can you have this conversation this openly with just anybody? Or you feel that some people are not fundamentally, but maybe they're a little bit more closed, and they need to get to a certain place in order to even start understanding what you're saying? How do you view that?
A few things come up. Vulnerability must be practiced, and that, I think, is something I learned. We get so distracted, so we're not that confident in our ability to be vulnerable, especially around strangers, even our loved ones. And I do think actively practicing vulnerability, especially with those you're really close with, is key to any healthy relationship. Now, there's any kinds of ways vulnerability can be expressed through any relationship. And in terms of just, the way I'm moving forward is, it's not an easy thing, but I'm trying. Like, I'm really trying to see how vulnerable and honest I can be as quickly as possible with anybody that is around me. And specifically when I'm meeting, let's say, strangers, or like I'm going on these dates, I'm just practicing being vulnerable and seeing what that looks like. And then it seems that the receiving party of my vulnerability, this causes more vulnerability because of my action and practicing my own vulnerability seems to rub off on those who want to feel vulnerable. I think we like to feel comfortable.
So vulnerability begets vulnerability. Basically, you have this like infectious effect if you're doing it truly, basically.
I feel that. It opens the room up for this space. It just takes, I think, one person to hold space for that, and then it's okay for everyone else. Now...
Yeah, you're saying, I didn't even know it was an option. And then all of a sudden you see somebody doing it and you're like, I can do that?
I can do that.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's an interesting way of looking at it. I didn't think of it like that. It's pretty simple. But I guess that really requires the first individual or the one individual in the room that is doing that to be truly, like, really doing that. Mm-hmm. And not just kind of like we, again, off camera, we talked about a little bit about the difference between the true pursuit of growth and the appearance of the pursuit of growth. And I feel like a lot of people are involved in the appearance of pursuit of growth. So like they like the components that make them look a certain way, and then they learn how to speak a certain way in order to make it look like they're really engaged with that thing. Yeah. Like, so many people tell me sometimes, oh yeah, like it's nothing. They're just like, yeah, I meditate a couple times with them. Like, really? Because it's obvious to me that most likely they have no idea what meditating is, right? They're just like sitting in a chair is not meditating. So like and it's not like people are purposefully deceptive, is that I feel like in order to truly understand what it means to put yourself on like this personal growth portion is, well, I guess vulnerability with yourself. It's just honesty about why you do the things you do in real time, which is a very difficult thing to achieve. But it's even more difficult to achieve if you have an entire world around you that is telling you what is the status quo, that they're telling you what is acceptable to express. And I guess it would be a good thing that more people, like we said in California, people are a little bit more open to these kind of ideas, and I'm pretty aware that a lot of other places in the world are opening up to that. But I do feel that there's like this extra component that needs to come into play aside of just saying the things that are associated with usually with these practices, versus actually like doing, like you said, doing the work, actually going and doing the work. But I really love the way you outlined it in the sense of like, well, you just gotta be that, literally be the change you want to see in the world. And do you feel that the leadership position that you've kind of described a little bit, do you think that's like an extra impediment or an extra obstacle there? Because you're supposed to be this thing that people are following and you're aware of that? Is this a responsibility that you've adopted, or you feel that enough people took interest in how you do things that all of a sudden it snapped into place and you realize that, okay, that must be my responsibility because that's literally what's happening around me?
That's a good question. I will say that I noticed my natural tendencies to lead without asking anyone to follow me. And I also have this undertone of responsibility to do something in this world, as many of us probably do. And I have been actively searching for, searching for what that looks like for me. I'm also somebody who likes to help and do for others, which sometimes can be a little exhausting for myself because I kind of forget to take time for myself. And there was a moment where I felt, well, I think the best thing I can do for anyone is to just be the best version of me. Now, best not meaning something that I can never achieve and there's always a better, but the version I want to be today. Now, I'm not well versed in this practice, but I'm aware of it. I'm working on it. But we have this moment right now. And if you're not being honest and vulnerable and, here, then we're not really here in our potential fullest capacity. If you're thinking about something else, thinking about the past or future, obviously we're not present. And if presence is all we have, and that is life, then we better figure out how to do it. And so for me, I just want to figure out how to be here and also how to connect, which means if I don't know how to connect with me, then there's no way I'm going to really know how to connect with you, except for the own limitation of my own ability to connect with myself. So by connecting with myself, and not just spending time with myself, going on walks, it's kind of odd, because like, oh, you mean I go on walks with myself? You know, I hold my own hand, I play with my skin, I tell myself how beautiful I think I am, looking at myself in the mirror, like all the things that you would do with someone else, or you want to hear from someone else, just kind of getting in that zone. And the world around me starts to become that very thing. The more I go here, and the more, let's say, beauty I find inside of myself, the more I can see that all around me. So in a way, the journey within, you immediately see the results around you. And the question is, you know, are my friends, and are the trees, and are the wind and everything around me, are they doing their due diligence of finding out who they are? Or is my journey to myself directly reflected in what's happening around me? And that's just an interesting question. And we could dive into that wormhole, but that's where it's also stress. It's removed stress from my shoulders of just like, you know, I'm gonna go here, and this is.
So you're doing your due diligence, basically. You know, you're doing your best. But that's an interesting. That is a point that I feel like we do need to like maybe break down for a second. So
right.
Like, because a lot of the stuff you described, like the looking into yourself in the sense of like finding the beauty, right? Some people will look at that and say, well, what do you mean? Like, is that like a narcissist? Like you're looking and you're saying, oh, I'm so beautiful? Versus, so there's the version of that is completely surface level, which might be narcissistic, right? But then there's the deeper level of like true acknowledgement of what in fact is beautiful, which are two complete, almost opposite things actually. There's the difference between knowing objectively, or it's a weird word to use in this context, but I feel like it's justified. Like there's some objective truths about the values each one of us bring into the world, and you can be mistaken about what those values are or how well you're expressing them into the world. But then being able to look at those things and acknowledge them and then act through them to better the world and other people's lives and all that stuff, versus the superficial level, which is like, oh, look at me, you know, I'm very good looking, women like me, men want to be kind of like me, I have all those qualities that people admire, and then lean into that and then pretend to care about the personal growth part while just doing the superficial stuff, which is like, I'm going to tell you this thing, I know you're listening because you know, qualities A, B, and C in me. Now I'm going to just say the things that's going to make me feel more important, and that is very different modality than trying to actually help that with the world. So like the thing I notice about you, which is I've told you this before, but this is like a real, I wouldn't be able to have this conversation as on the level that I'm having with you right now unless I would know you, right? If you would just be a guest that just came out of nowhere, this would be a difficult thing for me. I would honestly probably think, oh, you're full of shit, right? Because, I mean, look at you, right? You're a very beautiful person. You have like all those qualities that are that made you very successful in life, right? And then that, it's kind of hard to accept it from someone who looks like you, right? But because I know you, I've seen you operate, I've seen you like in situations of stress, in situations of like where you actually have to bring value for other people, and you don't let those obvious things on the surface be the driver of the situation. You're actually allowing the deeper quality of like, hey, now I need to empower this person. Now I need to make this person feel like they're actually doing the thing that they need to feel acknowledged for what they're doing. And I've noticed you do that, right? So all of that in view, is this something that you feel that came to you as an understanding that you need to do over time? Or do you feel that you always had this tendency of just kind of like remaining humble even though you were endowed with certain gifts?
I would have to say I come from good family, and there just was a moment where I realized that being nice to life and also being nice to those that people were not nice to was a nice thing to do, and I had impact.
But what do you mean by that? Did it feel wrong? Did you try at some situations and it felt wrong? Or you just kind of innately knew that that's a no-go for you? Like being mean to people when you could... Like if you can... Okay, so let's take a specific example, right? You have a certain situation in which you can have your way easier than some other person that, for whatever reason in that situation, they're competing with you on something. Would you do you remember pretty early on that you would take the high road and not just snatch the thing under their feet, even though you could?
That's a good point. That's a good question. Okay, well, I always had this awareness that I can be better at anything than anyone else. Maybe it comes from my dad's genes and my mom's too. My dad's very athletic and good at a lot of stuff. So I always knew, no matter what road I took, I was the best. So that was also helpful in my humble approach to life. Because through my humble approach, it received the same benefits of just knowing that I'm good at things, I'm good looking, people like me, I'm a nice person. Just decided that given what I've been given, to go down the road of humble, to go down the road of kind of a selfless love was a more rewarding path in how I felt. And I just didn't being mean or seeing people be mean to people. I mean, I was quite bullied growing up just because I chose a certain path, which was a high road, and I was also a popular person, and I was with the athletic crowd, and I'm supposed to be these things or these things, but I've always felt, and this directly comes from my study of Jesus and his ways, of, oh, this guy's badass, but he takes this road, and this is who he hangs out with. He hangs out with the ones who aren't the righteous, who aren't the Christians. He's hanging out with the sinners. He's hanging out with the losers, the sick, all the people that we kind of shove in a corner and on the streets of our society. And that story of this person, also someone who just owns his relationship, I believe, with the source, with God, and also saying, like, you all can do what I have done. I'm here to show you something a bit more expansive. With faith of a mustard seed, you can move a mountain. Like, well, that's an interesting thing to say, fella. And then the story of the death being...
Fella Jesus.
The story of his death being like, fear not. I will walk this scary path and I'll show you that it's okay, even though I'm sure it was very painful, but the man did it, according to the story. So
right.
It just painted this very powerful picture of, like, I want to be like that, where I'm not afraid of dying, and I represent the ones who aren't represented. And then it kind of tied to, I get a lot of attention. So then my just journey of, well, what is the story of me and this attention that I get? I can't just get the attention, make my money, and go live in my fancy house and my fancy cars.
Well, you can.
But I just have my friends live with me.
Yeah. Yeah, so you basically brought everybody on board. This is, how early did you get into modeling?
I was 24.
Oh, so that's pretty late.
I was 18. I was in California on a trip with a buddy of mine, and there was somebody who wanted to fly me, and then I think me and my brothers, I think it was Abercrombie, and they wanted to do a shoot in Canada or New York, and I want to say at the time it wasn't a good time for us to go into modeling. I was an athlete, so I just went into that world, but that was the first moment of, like, oh, somebody wants to pay me money.
Wait, why wasn't it a good time?
I think parents weren't so sure of it. of letting it. Or I have to talk to my parents about it, but it felt like they would let me go.
Okay, so it felt like more like parents wouldn't approve.
And it was right in the middle of maybe like an important football time.
Oh, I see.
Like 2-a-days or camp, and it's just like, this is my life. So I'd have to revisit the exact reasons, but I just remember it not working out. Could have been just a sketchy situation too. Like, I'll fly your boys up to Canada and take their pictures. You never know. I was pretty young. It officially started when I was 24. So, yeah.
What was the first what was that starting point at 24?
Meaning how that started?
Yeah, what was the first gig that you did in like professionally?
I did an underwear campaign for Mario Lopez. It's called Rated M. And I just, from the moment I got there, from the moment I left, I was in underwear, like tiny little undies. And I made it a point to eat lunch, all my breaks. I did not get out of my underwear. So I'm like, this is my job right now. Coming from football, training. I just played in Europe, and I'm trying to play in the NFL. And like, I'm training, and then all of a sudden I get, I think it was $1,200 for 8 hours of standing in my underwear. And I was paying a little bit of rent just to live near a beach and to surf all the time. And I'm like, this just bought me months of freedom.
That's crazy.
And I was like, I just stood in my underwear for 8 hours. This is cool. Didn't really think much of it. But somebody on that shoot, his name was Gary. He told me, he's like, look at this picture of myself. I was like, okay. I didn't know what I was doing. He's like, that face, that's going to make you a lot of money. And I was like, okay, Gary. I'm literally just standing there. I'm not doing anything. And then the rest is history. From then, I went from there to, I went to a model agency. That was booked from my commercial agency. And then they're like, you should try some modeling. So I went, shook some hands at a model agency. And this guy, Al David, was there. And he gave me a hug. How you doing? Let's take some pictures. He was helping rebrand this agency. And then him and I took to each other, and he took my photos. And it's a fun story through this journey because he was taking this kind of Tennessee athlete, masculine man, to the world of high fashion modeling, getting in touch with, feminine and more fluid motion and sexuality. So there's a bit of training in that segment where he helped me understand some things of the business. One of my favorite stories.
That sounds very bad.
One of my favorite stories, I'm sitting there butt naked, and he's taking my photos. He's always taking photos of a lot of it was cropped, but we're also working to turn on some people in the agency, so we're finding the right ways to shoot. And he's like, sit sexy. And I'm like, okay. I was on the couch, and I swear I tucked my leg over me, and I just kind of looked right back at him like some type of kitty cat. Just like, and he put the camera down. I was like, what the hell are you doing? I was like, I don't know, man. I'm just sitting sexy. He's like, okay. He's like, how would a woman sit? Like you see in pictures and stuff. I was like, okay. I'm 24 years old. I think I figured out maybe what I find women to be sexy or whatever. And so I just kind of open my legs up a little bit. He's like, there you go. I was like, oh, okay. Same concept. I get it. So we worked our way into helping me just discover myself and move certain ways, and also look at pictures of myself where I'm like, oh man, this is another version of me that I wasn't used to. And so after a time, he sent me out into the world, and I was like, okay, you've passed I can trust that you can represent my name. Now I know who you are. I know that you're willing to go out and
spread your legs.
Show up, spread your legs. You spread your legs. You know what I mean? Like, all right.
It's amazing.
Cool.
It turns out to do the same thing. Actually, that's an interesting question. Do you think that male poses and female poses are actually similar in the sexy ones? I feel a male. Well, I guess I don't know, because I guess for guys who are attracted to guys, it probably is a similar thing, right? When I'm thinking of from a men's perspective, who doesn't necessarily find men attractive, I'm just imagining that the more bravado, the more the cool look, the down look would be sexier.
Did you
right?
say down look? It's the
looking up
from the brows.
Yeah.
Somebody there.
Yeah.
Be angry.
It's like Joey from Friends, the smell the fart acting, remember? He was like, oh, it smelled the fart acting. He's like, what the fuck are you talking about? And he was like, it's like, it smells the fart acting.
That's funny.
Yeah. But that, I would imagine that would be a little different than females, because females wear skirts, so like spreading their legs kind of represent the, that. But you're saying that it's actually pretty similar.
Yeah, it depends on everyone's kind of taste of sex, but I think at the end of the day, we all have a sex appeal, and what I personally find sexy is someone who just knows who they are. It's confidence. It's confidence to spread your legs. It's confidence to spread your cheeks. It's confidence to spread your
it's just like,
smiles. It's confidence just to know.
Open up.
All aspects of yourself and not being afraid to do it in front of anyone and anything. To me, that's sexy, and it comes off in male form and female form. I will say that the males who stick to more masculine movement stay in the category of like boring,
I see.
And a woman who stays in the category of maybe just feminine, a little less boring because there's a bit more movement, and a lot of women know how to move, and it's really pretty. But you also have to combine and find the ability to access all parts of you, or else you just, you kind of got to show up and bring it to a space. And to do the same thing over and over again just does not work. In order to stay in the business, you almost have to continue to surprise people, which is not the easiest thing.
So this innovation thing, I feel like that's across the board. Like you still need to innovate, even if it's just taking a picture, like in the way that you present yourself to pictures. And you're right. There's like this. Some models you can see they have like a very small repertoire of how they do things, and I guess they become just like it's just that one thing. And exploring like new ways of expressing yourself in front of the camera is really where it becomes interesting. And I feel like it's actually not that far from acting, where, like for example, people are always concerned about how they look on camera for acting. And the one thing that becomes very apparent pretty quickly when you do this long enough is that the one thing that the camera captures that looks bad on camera is when they're one thing inside and then they're trying to do something else. And then it's kind of like it creates this like weird tension.
Yeah.
But when people just express exactly who they are in that moment, it looks natural and it looks interesting. Yeah, and I would assume that in modeling it's like a similar thing to that.
Yeah.
Yeah. How many years have you done that before you decided that this is going to be kind of like a more of a background thing? Or is it a background thing at this point for you?
Modeling?
Yeah.
No, I'm going to have to keep this on the foreground as long as possible.
Nice.
I mean, it's one of those gifts that's just like, I'm about to head into, I'll call it like the second phase of my modeling career, which is a bit more, I don't know, we'll find out what it looks like, but I just feel a bit more mature and accessible to myself, and the jobs are coming back. It took a big kind of pitfall for the past few years, and now it's coming back again, and acting has taken a kind of interest in my life as well, which is like the next level of expression in terms of the business. Obviously, we know music is a big thing, but in terms of paying me and paying for my dreams and lifestyle, like it's a pretty consistent gig that I think it'll stick around for a little while.
So you're saying that there's like a new wave of personal understanding that you can use in order to create like something new, like a new genre of your style of modeling?
Stay tuned for Justice's new style of modeling. I would say it probably will come off as a bit more genuine, maybe more refreshing, even for myself. When I got into doing a lot of money jobs, which I love money jobs, but some jobs are very boring and non-expressive, and many people would say you do these money jobs, it's like it's not the creative job we're looking for. A lot of the creative jobs don't really pay as much, potentially. I'm not sure. It changes.
What do you mean creative jobs?
When I say creative, I'm like, there's some where I'm in the studio and I'm just sitting there in front of a white wall and I'm changing 30 outfits a day and I'm doing the same stuff over and over again. To me, that's not creative. Now, there's creativity inside of it for sure. So I can't say it's not creative, but creative in the sense of, I'm doing a job where I'm jumping off into the ocean and I'm swimming back and forth and I'm riding motorcycles. I'm standing on the edge of cliffs because I'm the hero guy of this watch campaign. That's cool.
Okay, so it's a little bit more like you get to play with more elements than
more
just
elements,
you setting.
More of a character. Those are my favorite type of. That's probably everybody's favorite type of job in the modeling industry. It's like cool, especially when it's on cool locations and stuff.
So I guess acting would be the next natural thing to take it. Did you start acting with like an agency now, or?
Well, I don't think I have an acting agent right now. Working on it. I do have my manager. He's acting agent and got me on my last. And I don't know if I'm with his agent anymore. I may or may not have one. I have to check in. But I did just get booked for something in the fall, and that's coming out this summer. And I haven't yet taken it like crazy. I haven't gone aggressive into like I want to be an actor. I just find myself when I was with an agent, it's just like auditions for things that I didn't care about, and modeling pays more money, and also life is a stage and I can just do and be whatever I want to be. So I get satisfied in being able to play characters in life, especially when I live in the community and hang out with people every day. You kind of have to switch it up. But when I did this movie, I was pumped, man. I loved it.
What movie did you do?
It's called, of course I can't remember right now.
Justice's New Style of Modeling.
Oh man, it'll come to me. It's just slipping my mind. Well, I get to play a son of a mob leader who gets killed, and I seek revenge. So I'm after the killer. It's a low budget feature. I got the script on a Friday and we started filming Monday.
Damn.
So did the best I could, and we shot it in 8 days. I've seen it. It's pretty cool. First time watching myself in something, I would do a lot of stuff different, which is annoying because, like, man, if I only had a little more time and maybe prep.
It's always out.
But it's one of those just like, it's an action movie. It is what it is, and I'm in it, and it's...
Where can people watch the movie?
We're still working it out. It could be anywhere. I gotta remember the name. Before this conversation, I'm
Sure, we'll remember the name. So let's talk a little bit about music.
Yeah.
This is one of your favorite subjects, probably, right? When did you start playing, first of all?
Oh, cool. This is fun. I was sleeping, and I was in a dream. And I was playing a drum set, and that drum set happened to be in my attic. It's a 1942 Slingerland Bomber, and it was my great-grandfather's kit. I didn't know that it was so awesome then, but in the dream, I was playing a beat, and that beat was from, the movie That Thing You Do?
No.
From The Wonders?
No.
It just goes doom, bop, bop, doom, bop, boom,
oh, yeah, I know
bop,
this
bop. And at the end, it's a fill, do, 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 something like that. And I was rocking that beat, and I remember... in the dream thing, and this isn't so hard. And then I woke up, put the drum set up, and I was like, oh, I just playing that beat, just like that. Okay. That was it. Then I became a drummer for a long time. And my older brother was a singer-songwriter, so I played drums with him.
How old were you when you started?
Gosh, I have to say, I had to be in like 5th, 6th grade.
So, pretty early on.
Yeah, when I started that beat. In 7th, 8th grade, really started picking up into high school. Yeah, I love Blink-182. I learned how to play the bass and guitar because I was like, oh, this isn't too difficult. And I can play everything. No offense to those guys. I'm sure it's more difficult than I make it sound. Then I got into acoustic and piano because it's something that's not as loud and aggressive, and I can carry the guitar with me. And the piano became a very emotional a piece of instrument. Very meditative for me.
Wait, how did you learn though?
When I was a kid, very young, I did some piano lessons, which helped me understand a few things. I do remember playing Chariots of Fire, like a recital for people. And then I stopped playing for a while. And then, I don't know, the internet and guitar tabs.
Okay, so the YouTube was already kind of a thing?
YouTube, yeah, like guitar tabs. It was right around the time I was like, oh, just pull up the tab and follow the instructions. Sweet. And then I just, then I started just feeling around with movements and things. And being a drummer, the rhythm, I find very, very important for any musician. It's like the rhythm is so important. You can play one or two notes with a certain strategy with rhythm, you're fitting right into the best of them. So that's important to me, a rhythm style. And I've just kind of been, playing music and for fun since then.
How did you get to all of a sudden to make the Things, your band?
So the Things.
But by the way, Lucas, who's the singer for the band and the guitar player for the band, he was also on the podcast. Was that between you guys? Did you guys link up in the beginning? Was that what it was, or?
Lucas had the Things before I even knew him. He was a 16-year-old kid playing music in his garage. I know he had another drummer, and then him and I met, and I played drums with him, and we connected. Like, oh my gosh, this is great. It was easy to do this. And I was like, but I just started modeling and I'm all over the place, so I can't be your drummer. And so I introduced him, or he met my cousin Jared. And they were a two-piece playing together. And I'd go to their shows, and I just remember standing in front of Lucas and just like letting go and following his kind of vibe and feeling, okay, I get it. This guy is living and breathing this guitar, this rock and roll. His body moves. His attitude towards what he's doing is very honest and freeing. And I felt it in my body. And then a few days later, he called me. I was coming back from a road trip. He was like, dude, we'd like for you to play the bass. I was like, oh man, I'm so stoked. So I started playing bass with him. And we played a lot of shows. And then I shifted to playing the drums with him when Jared didn't do it anymore. And so I was drumming, and my brother started playing the bass. So there was that trio for a little bit. And then I went off to New York. I went on a trip. Lucas came to New York for a gig. I came to New York. We hung out in New York, and that's when we met Matt, or I met Matt. Lucas was playing music with him in LA before I saw Lucas in New York. He said, you got to meet Matt. He's a good drummer. So we all spent time in New York together that summer and became what is known to most people now, the Things. And then more characters joined for the making of the album, Oscar, Jules, Adam. And we also lived together and made this record, and there's that story. But
that is, by the way, an interesting story, because it's like the success story of the commune versus like the horror stories of communes, right? Like fucking cults.
Yeah.
This is the one commune that actually like incredibly creates magic and also creates a pretty good space to live in as well. Which, by the way, now you're in the next stage of that, right? You're kind of going on a little road trip because you sold the place, and before you settle on the next goal, you decided to travel the United States for a little bit and maybe the world. Yeah,
I'm not an airplane kind of guy right now because I've traveled in airplanes a lot, so I'm going to stick to the streets, even though gas prices are really bad. Is that 25 minutes?
No, it's just text that I'm trying to eliminate.
Yeah, so this is the second chapter of the Skipper Room. The first one also had to be taken down completely, which is kind of fun because there's music that was made in that room, and now it's still sitting on my on tapes and computer. At some point, I'm going to start releasing it. But then the second one was built on a house that I bought.
First, you want to tell us how you built the Skipper Room? The second one that you built?
Yeah, I found this house. At the time, I wasn't sure what I was going to do with it. I just knew that I needed a house because I was paying too much in rent. And I needed a separate spot for the studio. And this had a separate garage. And at first I put the studio and all my stuff in the house. It was a little weird. It's just me there. I'm just like, what am I doing in this house? Man, it was cool too. And then when I was in New York, when I was with Matt and Lucas, I had the studio the garage being turned into a room, close off the garage, do the roof, add a room for the control room, and by the time I came back, it was pretty much done. And then I had found a barn in Tennessee on a buddy's property and thought, this would be really cool decor. So I hired them to take it down, 2-story barn, Quentin and Danny. And they drove it out in a U-Haul and dropped it off on my driveway. And then my buddy Paul helped a lot, Lucas helped a lot, Jeffrey helped a lot, Matt helped. We all kind of put an effort to put all the wood inside the studio, which automatically gave it this really cool vibe, because Tennessee's where I'm from, so it just felt fitting. And I just started collecting gear. Lucas introduced me to a tape machine years back in the first skip room, and that changed everything. I just spent time with this tape machine. I made a record on the tape machine, all analog, and was discovering myself in terms of recording and what it looked like recording on tape, and then also what does it look like to make noise and music without thinking about making noise and music. So I really got into that idea.
What do you mean by that?
I guess the term would be improvisation.
Oh, I see what you mean. I thought you mean like something about the tape. It's like a background noise that you kind of have to.
Well, you kind of get some noise from tape, but no, mainly from the artist. I got into, let's just capture moments, and so I would have the whole kind of community of skip room came from me just putting on a tape and having the room set up and inviting certain people and seeing what they do, and then all of a sudden I roll a tape for 30 to 40 minutes and we make music, and I just like log these tapes. The first time I met Jules was through this experience. He walked into the first skipper room and he said, I want to sing. I said, well, no one ever comes here and says they want to sing. Like, for what, the whole tape? Okay. And we all put headphones on, and I started tape. And
it's when you came out with Why So Shy and all that?
Not that one.
Okay.
There's one before I have to show you, which is like, it's pretty awesome. 30 or 35 minutes of just like a bunch of us in a room. It's Jeffrey, Miko, Lucas, myself, Jules. I think Brenna was in the room with us. And we just made some noise, and that was my first interaction with Jules. He's in my head. I couldn't see him because I put a wall up so the sound would be separate from the drums. And I was fascinated. I was like, this guy, what is this guy? So many characters all of a sudden coming up in my head. I love this guy.
Oh, I think I remember.
Yeah.
With the different voices he made?
Yeah, all kinds of stuff.
Yeah,
Jules he's a character. And so the idea of just coming and having some fun, and I thought it's a good time for that, seeing how we're into this kind of digital music of perfection, overthought even production, and just to have a space where people could come maybe out of the noise, the perfection noise, and step into like just rock and roll and basic jams, and no one's carrying whatever. And then inside of that, I find to be some really like awesome music. And so that was the theme. People started coming down, and then this, the second skip room was built, and with these tape machines, and I designed it with all this, a lot of gear started coming, and then people would come over, we'd have a hang out for the day, and then I'd have a tape ready, and I'd prep the room and strategically invite certain people, and I'd just like see what happens. And people would leave me with this music on tape, and I would just sit there and mix it and, get it back to everybody by the time they left. But there was just something about that nobody could replicate.
Or people don't do that anymore. Oh, you mean that can't replicate because it was in the moment? Because it was
in the moment, and specific to that hangout. And there wasn't really too much, we didn't really think about it too much. And I really became, I won't say obsessed, but I really like that idea because there's just so much truth and honesty inside of that. Even my witnessing the artists, feeling their honesty. Once you start making a song, you can feel the change. Like, sing the song. I'm like, okay, we're singing the song now. That doesn't feel like when you did it without making the song. There was a heart in it, and I think that's kind of the challenge of every artist, to find the heart inside of like a repetitious tune. So because of that community, I was like, well, there's a few stories inside of this. I was sitting there one day in one of my yurts. It was my kind of meditation yurt. It was just me at the house. It was really beautiful outside. I was making some music in the yurt. And I guess I just started thinking about the idea of paradise and heaven, and like the concept of heaven being somewhere else. I come from a world where people talk about heaven being a place where we go when we die. And I guess I just thought like, okay, well, what is heaven? You know, what do people think of heaven? What is heaven to me? What do I want to see in heaven? I have a feeling it has to do with my own experiences of it. So I'm like, well, I just started naming some things. I was like, well, that's here. It's all around me. And there was just a feeling that kind of clicked that was like, all of a sudden, it was just like different colors, more awareness, more just appreciation. Like, oh man, like I feel like I'm in said place now. Maybe we just have these stories and concepts that keep us separate for some weird strategy of ours as human beings. So I decided, well, you know, I want to help build this place, paradise, heaven, whatever people think of, like there's a better place. Well, let's make that better place now. And I thought, well, I have land and I want to be helpful in terms of hosting a place where people can come at least talk about these things. Let's figure it out. How do we build this kind of paradise, utopia for each other and ourselves? And then, you know, first, you know, somebody moved in, you know, paying some rent to live in a yurt. Some moved into a van, paying some rent. Some moved into a house. Some people were transitioning out of LA to go to Tennessee, and we made music together. So it started becoming a hub. Which I love, because I was like, I love making and recording music. So how do I have good music? Well, what are basic needs? Food, water, and shelter. Well, I have at least the shelter part. And I could provide place for people to stay while they're transitioning. Just make music with me. Or my thing is like, how much are you paying now? And where do you live? Well, I pay $2,800 and I live in between 1,000 people in the city. How about $750, $500 for a tent? It's 10 by 12, but it's out here, you know. It's appealing. But this person also offers something great for me in my world, like an aesthetic or a vibe, personality, artist. And so when that started happening, when people started coming to the property, the color started to shift. Certain things started to happen that's different than what I normally would have done.
Wait, but you mean physically you saw a different color, or you mean metaphorically?
No, physically. Like,
you
they
could
would paint.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
Yes,
okay. I thought you actually started seeing, like, psychedelically, like, start seeing a better color. I'm like,
maybe, but I didn't see somebody painting it.
Okay. I'm like, you're fucking onto something now.
Well, yeah, for sure. And it just turned into this really, really cool place. I mean, at one point, man, it was Matt, Lucas, Skylar, Ray, Oscar, Brenna, Jules, Taos, Adam.
Kaya then.
Kaya was born into this place. I mean, the whole pandemic thing also offered a sanctuary for a bunch of us, because that's when it got real. I was like, move in. We're making it work on that. I moved out of my house and moved into a 10 by 12 little like tent, which I love because I was like outside all the time, so that I could make room for these characters. And it was so much fun. I mean, every morning would be a cup of coffee, some tea, and whatever anyone wanted to enjoy, and conversation, and making a song and music. And it was a dream to be in this kind of conversation with these kind of characters. It just spurs everyday intention. And we can grow off each other. We can reflect off each other. We can learn how to be a better version of ourselves with each other. And, you know, we'd have to have meetings and chit chat, and we'd have dramas, but we'd solve these dramas through conversation and love. And I got to see a really beautiful picture of how I believe human beings can interact with one another. And we're in tight space. I have not even half an acre, and we had like 13 people at one point living all around. But to see how we can interact at any ages from like 24 to 38 was quite beautiful. And albums were made, videos were made. We were so productive, and it was just like this cool business, community, family, tribe. And to me, that's what heaven looked like or looks like. my idea. It's creativity, it's music, it's nature. There's a few things I would shift. It's why I sold the house, because I'm like, this isn't it. This is a slice of it and a picture of it, but this is not the one that's in my head.
So is it a form of community that creates together, supports, and sustains the environment in which they live in, and just the way that they express themselves through that space together? Would that be like a good representation of what you envision? Like, and then do you think that's, and I know it might be a little bit of a boring question, but do you think that's scalable? Do you think it's possible to live? Because I'm actually thinking about this a lot.
Yeah.
Because you told me about this idea a few times, and then, but you know me, I'm like with my trying to like put everything into like a framed box. But like I think in a good way. Like I'm trying to like sometimes, yeah. But what I'm trying to think is like, so we were created. We evolved to thrive in certain numbers, right? Like a village would probably be it, like 100 people max. Like beyond that, there's already kind of like a different kind of tension. I think even 100 people is already a lot, right? But then we found a new way to cope with that number of people living in the same space. So we came up with some rules of thumb, like certain social pressures, like society, right? Already, like maybe 100 people is not yet society, but like you have certain rules that didn't exist when you were just the 10 of you, right? Yeah. And then we grew into a larger number, and once again we came up with like a different frame to like what it means to be like a small town, right? And then a city, yada yada yada, right? Then state, everything we see today, and now we're becoming like a global civilization, or trying to become a global civilization, which is like an enormous challenge, right? And now you have to think in terms of like communities online, how do they arrange themselves, all that stuff, right? Now I view all of that as one enterprise. Now this is when you and I maybe a little differ a little bit in our perception, where for you this would be kind of like seems to be more of a destructive force than a constructive force. I fall in the camp a little bit more on the side of like, well, no, that's just business as usual. It's just like, now it's the next step of evolution, and we're trying to figure out the best way to frame it, right? So the reason I'm saying that is because I thought a lot about what you were saying, and maybe the answer to that, which is like, how do you build a healthy global community, is that you cater to whatever the genetic component dictates. So like you take the fact that we actually thrive in a certain number of people, and you design little hubs of this number of people and no more than that is embedded in a larger system. Because what seems to happen is that the individual exists alone in those very large structures, like the city, for example. So the thing that drives that individual crazy is the fact that they feel completely isolated and alone in a city of millions, right? Which is a very, like, we all know the phenomena, right? Like you in New York, you go and you just feel like you don't know anybody, even though there's so many people on the street. There's no way, you don't feel like there's an actual chance to meet anybody. LA, same thing. But if you engineer it from the perspective of like you create those little communal hubs that are designed, like the quarters of living are designed around in a way kind of like the way you did Skipper Room, right? But then you embed that in a city. Now you have the larger city and all the benefits that come from that, but you also don't feel alone because you live in this smaller structure that you actually get a lot of benefit from socially, and also you feel more protected and more comfortable because you have the human interaction. So I feel like a hybrid. So as long as you collect it back to like those small groups of, let's say, I don't know, 20 or maybe 30 or 40, and you somehow create a system that allows for those little communities to exist, and then I feel like you can extrapolate, like you can make a global society without people losing their minds. Like you can actually be a global civilization that is contrived of those like smaller little hubs or like smaller. So I actually think you're actually onto something. But the question is, how do you implement the whole, all the little details of how you build that? So let's say the next step, or the way you envisioned the next step, was to maybe buy a bigger land. And I know you were in the process of like kind of looking at that bigger land, and then you decided not to do it for different reasons, but you might still do it like later on, maybe not, maybe yes, who knows. But would you say that the next step would be try and replicate what you did with the skipper room in just a larger space and encapsulate just a little bit more people? Would that be...
Yeah, I would say the biggest frustration of the people of the skip room and myself was not enough room. We need our own space, and we don't need to share our space with everyone. There is a shared space, and that's a great place to go to, but everyone needs their own space, have their own relationships, they have their own families, and like, I want my own space. Like, I'll be living up in a tree 50 acres that way. And I'll
fucking go with like Tarzan. How the fuck do you pronounce it? Tarzan. There you go.
Swinging out.
Fucking foreigner. So you fucking swing in the morning. Grab your coffee.
That sounds nice.
That's so fucking nice.
And to go on a walk from my place to somebody's place that I love very much. A land that will host a bit more people, very specific on who maybe is on this land, because it's also designed for future generations, for my generation of children and my families and my tribe on this earth, like a place for children to I always believe that it's very stressful to have children like a city, but it's not when you live in the country. I used to go and run out and play, and gave probably my mom and dad time to hang out with each other. And the most stressful thing is like, don't get struck by lightning or don't get eaten by an animal. Like, it's not very likely.
Yeah, but that's fucking horrific.
But it's probably worse. Like, watch out for the car or some weirdo that's cruising the streets, like, that kind of thing. And trying to remove unnecessary stress so life can feel a certain quality. And I don't want to live in solitude away from civilization. I just want to live in community with people that I enjoy talking with, people that I know I can build things with, people I know I can create with, and have full control of my world and our world. For me to reach out to the earth and say, I want to take control and change it, like, okay, that's a little stressful thought. But what I can do is create a little mini slice of world, which I think is the same vibration, the same vibe that I'm trying to put out into the rest of the world. And it's a combination of, the ways, humans interacted with Earth, but with the evolution of technology. I mean, if, humans who interacted with Earth had people before us had access to what we have access to, what could be created and developed to sustain ourselves in ways that would remove even a lot of labor. Like, let's figure out how to use technology to grow food on our land. Obviously, let's get the sun working for us. And there's a combination where we can work with technology to make this bit easier and instantly communicated to the world around us. Not to mention the support that we could ask for from the world based upon the story that we're telling. There's a sweet combination of the two. I'm not trying to run off and disappear from civilization or even cities. I'm going to be outside of one in the trees, because that's personally where I work the best and do things the best, is where I don't have noise. I have nature. It's just my own personal thing.
That's a great point, by the way. I have actually, maybe we're not as far apart on how we see the perfect future as I thought we might be. Because I too think that if we combine technology with this more natural world, like we embed technology in the natural world, then it will, feel healthier, will probably be, it would just feel better to wake up every morning this way. And also we still have all the positives that we get from the internet, technologies. Like, again, Lucas is like a perfect example, right? He really loves living off the grid kind of thing, but he's amazing at technology and he has a very technical mind. And like the types of technologies that are going to exist now absolutely allow us to live off the grid but still connected. And I think that would probably be the middle ground. You don't enjoy New York at all? Like cities like New York?
I went there about 7 months, and it was fun.
But to visit, like you wouldn't live there?
No, there's no way. It's
like,
just,
even if it's like an amazing like super condo on Central Park, not for you?
No.
Okay.
No way. Even just being around so many people.
What about in a treehouse in Central Park?
Now that's a little different. But no, I wouldn't. I've had enough experience with people and the world to love interacting with people. I love it. But there's this other chapter of life that is, in order, I think, for me to fully embody what I want to be. Obviously, I can do this at any moment, but my environment, I want it to look different. Like the skip room now, there's this main street that's behind it that you may never know because I'm not showing it in any of my fun videos. It looks like I'm in nature. I am, essentially, as much nature as I can find in Southern California.
Oh, come on. Southern California is filled with nature.
In terms of
nature.
Near the beach and restaurants and things, I got really lucky finding this kind of place. It's a slice of paradise. There's farms and ranches and oceans. It's cool.
By the way, I feel the same way about Pasadena.
Yeah.
It's like the perfect hybrid between a city and like a place that is very accessible to nature.
Cool.
Go ahead, sorry.
I just didn't know that about Pasadena. But,
well, you're missing
they're blocking your mountains now, so we got a problem.
All you gotta do is move to the next bonfire. You just move the next building over. Every time they build, you move to the next building over.
Just walk.
On the other side of the
there they go.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's maybe a little bit selfish. It's my world. It's what I want to have for me to be, I wouldn't say happy, but it's what I want to build. And those who resonate with this idea and dream and want to really build something like that means something on a scale that's doable, I've got some ideas. So sign up with the email list. I am collecting many ideas and from everyone, because it's like, what does paradise look like? What does heaven look like to you? Like,
wait, do you really?
I haven't not sent out the official invitation, but there's been times where I've asked this question and I've noticed the answer, and it's like flowers that smell like this, trees that look like this, there's a river, and I'm like, okay, it's in my head, like it's in our heads, it's out there. It's kind of what's so fun about this chapter is I no longer own my house. I have to leave in a week. The owner now is letting me stay in there for another week so I can move out, and then begins my adventure of finding it. Like, I had this idea. Now it's like, and that was one of the reasons why I sold it. I was just like, well, if I am a dreamer and a believer in my dreams and going after my dreams, then I'm going to have to sell this baby right now. And I'm going to have to get out and open up the door for what is next. A place where I feel is more permanent, where I can start this building of events, festivals, community, gatherings, home. So it's an exciting chapter of seeing how it unfolds, because I do feel very passionate about it. I mean, I'm also very happy with me living there and doing all this and inviting people into the property. But I found that it's really fun to have a team, a tribe, a family, and then it'll go into the next chapter of like, oh, you're having children, sweet. Let's have a little community of children. And I think it's very important to pay attention to how our children are being raised.
Oh, I fully agree there, yeah.
And I would like to do my part, and like I want to know that my child is interacting with certain people that I trust, because they're so influential. Even going to schools these days. I mean, my ex's child, he would come home and have these different maybe languages or attitudes and things. It's like, are you picking this up in school? You're a cool kid. Like, don't be taking the influence of these other kids. You're a cool kid, you know.
Like what, for example?
Oh man, just
you're a different gender? Or?
No.
That's going on.
No, just an attitude, how he responds to his mother or responds to situations. It's like, what is that?
Huh.
And also just a space. I mean, this is a new thing that came up, is like just hosting, like fostering children, like giving children a space to come into and being around like elite adults. Like, it's also another segment to this property is like, and also these festivals, Musical Meeting of Magical Minds, is hosting very specific human beings, like the ones who do the work. put them on a piece of property together that can interact daily, all of a sudden there's just the conversations and the world starts to shift in a bit more magical way because of the people on the property. And to bring children and people to come into this environment that interact with these human beings, there's change that happens, shift that happens, healing that happens, power that happens. And that's also, it's not just for anyone, you know. It has to be for the warrior minds, the ones who are like, now I'm not saying you can't come and visit and stay, but if you don't know how to work through your own frustrations and ego, then there's going to be a headbutting on this land that I can't stand.
But that's why most communes failed. Because people, it's a difficult thing to do. Yeah. It's not that easy, right? In the modern world, where you have the other option. Like back then, you didn't have an option. Yeah. So like a village was the village, and if you wandered too far outside the village, you get eaten, or you get lost, or you starve, or whatever. Now it's not like that. So because you have that out, I feel like there's a much lower threshold of where you get fed up. And the only way that people, I feel like, stay in that environment is when they really believe in that mission and they really want to do it. Like you said, they also do the work.
Yeah.
So it's not just doing the work. It's also understanding the actual dream that the people on the property are trying to create, basically.
I will say that I don't want to feel like or to express that this land isn't for anyone, but I've experienced that like it's not for everyone to come into this community, to come be a part of the community. Some people want to come in for a little bit. Some people want to stick around longer, and
well, not everybody are like-minded.
That's true. That's
so some people want different things. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's very specific to those who want to be a part of my dream, and also just it just sounds fun. Like it gives me something to do for the rest of my life. I see my picture of, let me try to be a part of this, learning how to live and survive with land mixed with technology with other human beings. It's no different than a neighborhood. It's just an intentional living situation. With technology and new ways of building, we don't need all the excess rooms. We can have a more efficient home. It could be underground. It could be in a tree. It could be built out of dirt. It could be built out of recyclables. It could be built out of, now we have these robots that are building concrete homes in days. I'm like, well, that's super rad. So a bit more unique to, my mind and the minds around us, because I do want people to come to the land and experience music festivals and events and look around like, whoa, what a cool piece of art this land is, So it's a canvas, and I'm just looking for those who want to help paint this earth canvas.
No, but again, it's, not everybody even their sense of paradise might not even be the same.
Right.
So even for me, for example, this style of living, this very earth oriented kind of thing, for me it was an acquired taste. I lean much more towards future space, take me to another planet. That's kind of where my default is, right? Now obviously, at least in the near future, going to another planet or another star is just it means there's a lot of darkness for a long time. That's not really a feasible thing, right? But I would love to live in the future where we can just hop on a ship and just, either go to sleep for a few dozen years or 100 years and wake up on a different planet. That's an amazing prospect for me. But
are you sure you can't do that?
What do you mean?
Just freeze yourself for a while?
Maybe you can't. Yeah, but we just don't know how to unfreeze you. we don't need to freeze you to take you to Mars. We will get there. I am convinced that I will step on Mars.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Cool.
I'm pretty convinced you will too, because it will be much easier than you think probably in your lifetime. Sure. But still speculation. But my point is that I, again, slowly learning the value of what you're describing as well, because even there, and I think I told you this before, even if we're populating new planets, we still need a certain attitude towards the dirt we're stepping on. So if the dirt is on Mars, if the dirt is on some planet around Alpha Centauri, it's still the attitude towards your immediate environment is the one that you're going to appropriate in that moment. So like if you tend to not give a shit about your environment and you just do whatever to the extent that you can, that's what you're going to do. You're going to do it on other planets as well. It's just a matter of time before you kind of, unbalance those environments as well.
Right.
I think the attitude of tending to your immediate environment, your land, enjoying the fruits of whatever the land actually has to offer, is a very important component of being able to become an interplanetary civilization or interstellar, right? Because you have to take that attitude with you. And actually, I even would take it one step further, where I perceive it to be that the fate of humanity in the universe would literally rest fully, not even a little bit, but fully, on our ability to tend to Earth at the moment. If you can't figure it out here, if you can't manage a small fortune, you can't manage a large fortune. It's just not how it works.
Yeah.
If you can't manage your immediate environment, you're not going to be able to do that anywhere. So I think that that's actually like a very important mission, that way or another, even with the future in view, basically.
Yeah.
The more I interact with you, the more I kind of get to hear a little bit more about how you view things. Would you say that like it like constantly shifts for me? Like I feel like I got it, and then I feel like there's another component that like I'm exposed to, and then the more I kind of interact with you, the more I'm like not 100% clear on what would you say is your end goal. Like, would you say that it's to proceed with this mission of trying to build that world that you're describing, or is it not necessarily? Like, maybe there's like other things that you're considering as the main life mission, or you don't even think about that?
I would say that's on my mind. I see myself as an old man on a rocking chair on my front porch, and I have conversations with all kinds of people. And I see a certain aesthetic in my head, families and children, and to me, just conversation with another human being in a really beautiful environment. To me, that's life. A cup of coffee, a cup of tea, and just talking, or just sitting there, silence. On this land, for me, I see partnership, I see family. It's coming a time in my life where I would like to interact with children, my own. I got to experience that for a little bit in the past few years, and I really enjoyed what child has to offer. The honesty and vulnerability of the child is something that needs nurturing, and it's like I want to do kind of my due diligence of like bringing children into the world and into a space that gets to witness grown-ups, if you will, but grown-ups who have not lost that magic, that childhood wonder, who've either stayed pretty pure in terms of like how they handled life and haven't lost that wonder, or have done the work to return to kind of that state of honesty and vulnerability and not you need to be like this, you got to be like this, but just can kind of meet child in a state of student. Let children be teacher. Let that see what happens. So for me, I'm entering into a place where I am looking for someone. When the time is right to try this next chapter on, which that sounds like a fun practice, and then to start that adventure, and that happens when I find this land, this home base, this musical world. Because it also encompasses my musical production, which is festivals I love, and I want to do it on my own land. Recording music, I want to do it on my own land. I just want to use my feet to get around, not feel like I have to get in a car or airplane to get around. That doesn't mean there's not going to be more, and with that, I also go on my own adventures, and I have some properties in other places that I'll go to, and I'm feeling pretty much prepping for a long period. Well, I guess they're called long-term goals, which I haven't really stepped into before.
Do you usually act out of just whatever feels right at the moment?
Whatever feels right in the moment, shorter term. Yeah, this one's probably my first, like, oh, I see this. It's going to take a while, and I'm going to enjoy doing this because I love building stuff. And if I can build whatever I want on a piece of land to do whatever I want, like, I'm occupied. And if I have cool people to hang out with and, like, talk about all kinds of stuff and also build stuff and then have, see the fruits of our labor be enjoyed. I also enjoy when people come see the buildings and like, this is awesome. Who's doing this? And it's magic. If people come to my property and be like, this is heaven, this is magical, I want to live here, and I'm just taking notes of these words. I'm like, oh, this does something for people, this environment. So I'm also looking like, what is that thing why does this property that I have with these people bring so much joy and freedom? Now, yeah, sometimes, actually every time before I have events, I do put a lot of intention on just the space in general. I want to think that people walk in and by the time they leave, something washes over them potentially, and they can feel a bit lighter and feel at least comfortable enough to be as much as themselves as they'll let themselves be, which a little bit of freedom, and maybe by cultivating that kind of space and attention, it just naturally happens. I've had some people in the past who've taken their lives based upon, I believe, not having the proper community to allow this full expression all the time, because whatever we tend to give labels to certain personalities.
Wait, when you say took their lives, you mean like committed suicide?
Yeah, they just didn't belong anymore, and I'm like, you did belong. You just needed to find the right people to belong with. And that also stirs up a lot of this like environment for people to be. So yeah, I feel like
not belonging, not being a part of anything.
Yeah, it's like they weren't a part of what they could have been, a part of where they could feel safe and not judged based upon who they were, which I found to be very fascinating personalities and individuals. Just, if you're having an episode, go run into the trees and just go yell at the trees, whatever. Now, don't do it in the streets. People think you're crazy, but you can do whatever you want out in the woods. I've done the same thing. Take a bit of mushroom, take a bit of something, go around the woods and act a fool. If I did that in the streets, I'd look like a madman, and they'd probably put me somewhere I don't want to go, Just shifting the environment.
So you're saying that to express some insanity is not a bad thing?
No, I think we should do more in terms of even looking into the word insanity. Usually just, maybe it's something we can dissect, but I guess I look at it as just like, really different. Now there is a place of insanity that's like in terms of just witnessing evil is a thing, pure evil, and it's insane. I like to think everyone has an opportunity to shift into a much more loving state, but doesn't seem to always happen for people, and I don't have answers for that. But I would also look at the environment in which these people lived in, and I had to dissect that portion.
So you're saying that the environment is definitely a big portion of not being able to shift to a more loving state?
I think so. I think it's all about the community and the environment, the love. I mean, that's a whole topic of parenting that's a whole nother thing.
Yeah, no, but I agree with that. I think that people do draw a lot of who they become from the environment that they grew up in, obviously. And I think that it becomes very apparent on the edges of the spectrum, where people become, like, you're right, there's some people that are just gone, and unfortunately they're gone beyond the point of kind of repair maybe. But people who are kind of on the fence, and they might pop if they have the right environment of people and the right context with which they can actually express some of those emotions and feelings, then they might not be driven over the edge.
Yeah.
They might actually stay like in a more sane place. Terence McKenna, when he went with his brother Dennis McKenna, I think the story took place in La Chorrera, I never know how to pronounce it, Lachorero. And they did this copious amounts of those Amanita muscaria mushrooms that are like crazy psychedelic. And Dennis actually lost his mind kind of for a little bit. And he said that the reason he believes that he fully recovered is because he didn't have people around him putting him in a room telling him, oh my God, something's wrong with you, and trying to do something about it. Instead, they were in the middle of nowhere by themselves. So he kind of just came back to his senses, basically. He had enough time to kind of traverse this crazy land, and then eventually he came back to who he was, and maybe slightly different, but probably different even in a better way. But he really believed that if you would take the same situation and you put it in the context of a mental institution where people, just by being there, it's implied that something is terribly wrong with you, and you're surrounded by true madness, that's what you're going to absorb. And especially when you're in that state of like complete being very vulnerable, like you said, but you're not trying to be vulnerable. Now you're just kind of stripped away from all your defense mechanisms that you develop as an adult in those states. Then you obviously absorb all the wrong things. Yeah, so I think that applies not just to psychedelic states, but is applied to also extreme states, which I think become psychedelic. Like near-death experience is a psychedelic state. It's an altered state. It's not a regular state. Psychotic break, like all those things, they are very extreme states. And I feel like if you have a nurturing environment, it might actually help you ride it out and not just fall prey to the teeth of whatever the condition is. Yeah. So I'm fully in full agreement with you there. And would you say that, by the way, did you ever have a state like that, like with psychedelic drugs, where you felt like you just didn't know where left and right was anymore?
I would say the craziest experience I ever had was taking this DMT ritual, which that was a trip.
Literally. You care to talk about it?
Yeah. There's more details on how we did it. It was a long process. We drank from a root, which this tree is the tree they used to, I want to say, build the Ark of the Covenant or something. It's just some really cool story from where this tree comes from. And we drank from this tree, or what's come from this tree, and this powerful tree. I think they call it like the blood of...
Holy shit.
Blood of God or something. Some of this really cool saying. I was like, yeah, I want to
have the blood of God.
Just something crazy sounding. And I'm like, yeah, I want to have a little sip. And then it was really beautiful. We sat in meditation and breathing for a few hours, and then came the smoking of the DMT. And I got really sick right off the bat. I was like, oh, this is crazy. Oh, no. Oh, great. Here comes that part of me that goes into the depths of... I don't do a lot of psychedelics because I always go through... It's a very spiritual thing, and it's not easy at first because it's like I go into the depths of everything that I don't want to see in order to then feel great. So the first part's always difficult, and I'm throwing up. There's a few of us, we were in the skipper room. A few of us were doing this. And...
Wait, so an oral DMT, was it more like ayahuasca? Or?
It was, we smoked it.
Okay, you did, okay.
And then there was like 8 of us in the room, and then just blah, feeling helpless and hopeless, and like, how long am I going to be here? And then I felt myself surrender. Like, oh, okay, I get it. It's why I hike the volcanoes. Like, I got to get exhausted so I can finally listen. I must be pretty stubborn. And then I was on my hands and knees on the ground, just like in kind of a phase, praying phase. But the visuals were everything you see that people paint that's done DMT. It's like this world of, you look into, I think, kaleidoscope. It's like that, like, what is this? And I could see arms and things, and like, it was wild. And then I opened my eyes, and I'm seeing all these colors in between the colors. And my favorite moment was I was kind of sitting up, and there was just this giant that enters this view right here. And it's white, huge boots, like a white outfit, almost like a mixture between a Star Trooper, I think, but also more robed out. And he had some bling on him. I didn't see above like too far. I don't know what him, her, what it was. I just say him, it's just what I do. Sorry, people who get offended. And he gave me this necklace that looked like the heart of the ocean off Titanic. It was this blue, like silver, long silver, whatever you want to call that, just
necklace
thing that holds the jewel.
Oh.
And I had my hands out. I gave it to me, and I was like, okay, I guess I'll put it on. I was pretty excited. And then I started thinking about what that was, and it turned around and left. And I was like, man, I shouldn't have started thinking about it because it pulls me out of the zone. And then I just fell into a state of just pure gratitude, pure awe, wonder for the next few hours. And yeah, for the next few days. Just a shift of, like, I'm sorry, what was that?
It's the first time you've done DMT?
I would say second time. The first time, my friend Lynn, she had some in a little secret box. And I was like, I want to smell it. So I had a little sniff of it, and I was like, whoa.
Yeah,
I could feel it from smelling it.
It smells gnarly.
And I was like, I like to kind of dip my toes in. I don't just take something just to take. I'm like, let me smell it. Let me have a little bit. Let me introduce my body. So I had a little bit that time, knocked me on my back. And thought I was dying. I was like, here we go. This is death. And I don't want to die. I was anxious. And then oranges and purples and the designs, all that, like a whole nother thing. And then I remember my head just goes, and I hear, and I was like, am I dead? Is this dying? Because I'm breathing, but that's my grounding. It's like, as long as I feel myself breathing, And then it became really beautiful as I surrendered. It seems to be something of just like surrendering to. That was the lesson of that. It's like surrender, and also getting to look at like fear of separating from self, identity, body. So that was 2 times.
That is so common. Yeah, that's frequency.
Good to know.
Yeah, it's like
it's like flatline. Did I die, everybody? They probably look dead.
It actually sounds like a ramping up of a frequency, kind of. It's like, and then
it's just like,
yeah, and it's almost like all the air is pumped out of the room. Was it outside or no?
I was outside, but it did. I know what you're talking about.
Yeah, it's like, yeah.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
Yeah,
so this is dying. It's pretty colorful.
It's I feel like the visuals are just like secondary. Honestly, there's like so much more going on.
Yeah, it's kind of a distraction. Because I'm feeling all kinds of stuff, and then I'm like, oh, but it's pretty looking. I'm like, oh, but what else is going on?
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's like a little rattle for a baby. Mm-hmm. It's like all those toys.
Oh my gosh, so everything's okay. Let me show you some cool colors. Yeah.
It's fine.
You're dying, but it's pretty.
You're like, you don't want to show you the beyond. It's like fucking insane.
Yeah.
It's like New York City, but like fucking in the 4th dimension.
Mm.
So one thing I wanted to ask you, you travel the world quite a bit, right, for work? Is there a place that you feel the most at home at? Is that California?
I mean, I've been out here for 10 years, which is maybe the longest I've been anywhere. So this is my home, more so than I felt any other home. Yeah.
Yeah, there's something about California for sure.
I'm just kind of got fed up with certain things.
Oh, you mean here?
Yeah, it's not anyone's fault. Just a lot of people want to be here, I'm also finding like it could be nice to have seasons, especially somebody who likes to be on his land. To see the trees change. Also, I really like the aesthetic of trees in the winter. I like bare branches in the sky. I'm entertained.
But how are you with the cold? I know some people just can't take the cold.
I will just fly down to Nicaragua and go stay at my house, like that's my safe haven. That's my getaway if I just want to stop doing all this whatever I'm doing. I just go live down there and life is good.
Daniel Tosh has a really old joke where he says, people who live in Canada, they say, no, I can never live in California. I love seasons. And he goes, yeah, I love seasons too. That's why I live in a place that skips the shitty ones.
That's pretty funny.
Yeah. So let me ask you this. If you could literally wave a magic wand right now, what would be the one thing that you would change in this world that you feel that would make everything else kind of snap into place? Is it how people see each other? Is it people enjoying their immediate environment? Did you ever think of that? Like, what is that one component that makes everybody fucking chill and just get on and enjoy life?
Okay, yeah, I think I do have some type of answer. It's somewhere around the world of like, don't be so offended. Don't be so concerned on what other people do or say. It has nothing to do with you. Like, it's nothing to do with me. Like, what's happening out there. And if something is bothering me, it has everything to do with me. Does that make sense? Like, it's not you.
That's a very surprising answer, and it's actually a very wise answer. That's not something I expected to get back, but I think that's brilliant.
I think that helps because it just removes blame. When you stop pointing at someone for making you feel a certain way, then you take a bit of ownership and there's peace. Because there may be frustrations and dramas, but it comes from a place of frustration of myself, and I'm sharing my frustration to find a way through this. Like, I'm sharing my frustration with you as opposed to like blaming you for making me frustrated. And in that world, now people become entertaining. And that's what I really like too in living in this community where people are aware of this, because then you get freedom. Like, express yourself however you want to express yourself. I know I'm not making you feel anything. And I know not to be offended by your actions or reactions. So you can be whatever you want, and I can sit here and watch you transform, develop, be. And even if you say a word that I think is this thing and you say it that way, I don't care. Also, just awareness of language being just a representation of our feelings, and they're not exact. We're just saying things.
Yeah, they're inert. They don't actually capture whatever the deepest thing that we were trying to say.
They're just holograms of our expressions, and if you get caught up in that world, well, you're going to miss the whole picture.
That's brilliant, man. I love that. There was one more thing I wanted to ask you, and then we can kind of close on that note. You mentioned family in the beginning, and you said that a big portion of how you are, you think, is derived from how your parents were, probably genetically, but also the way they treated you and your brothers, right? How many brothers are you guys?
2, 3 total.
2 total. Oh, I thought it was more.
Just 3 of us.
Cool. Mm-hmm. So, who was the other?
Jeffrey, Javen.
Oh, so 3.
I'm Justice
okay.
the second.
No, I know. You're Justice
the first, actually. But the second born.
Okay. What did your dad do, by the way?
He did a lot of things. He was involved in church, his ministry, got involved in like ministry mixed with Taekwondo.
Wait. Say what? Ministry.
So basically, it was entertaining through karate and performances. We all became black belts and traveled around and like did performances at schools in different regions. And then he would have a message of some sort to give to the people that he felt he needed to give. And it was based around like drugs and alcohol and sex and with Christian roots. It was pretty cool. We'd have a whole show around it. We actually did it in Australia for 2 weeks. It was cool. It's called the extreme team.
What the fuck?
We wear the same outfits.
This is so fucking amazing.
I break boards and stuff.
He did Christian karate.
Yeah, you call it Christian karate. You know, it's
Taekwondo karate.
It was Taekwondo. It was its own thing, and he combined it with his job of, I don't know if you ever heard of FCA. It's called Fellowship of Christian Athletes.
No.
Which maybe it's more Southern, but it's wrapped around Christian athletes, just community for Christian people who play sports.
Interesting.
And so we would just entertain through karate, and then he would he'd give a kind of a speech.
That is so hilarious.
Yeah, different
This
type of
is amazing.
church, but we perform. It was quite fun.
Wow.
And then he got into a few things, and then he got into acting. He was just kind of decided to go into that world and more entertainment world. I think in his 40s. Yeah.
Wow.
And he's still doing that.
What about your mom?
Mom, I know she was a book publisher when I was young. And then, gosh, what did she do after that when we moved? Gosh, it's hard to say. I mean, she was mom. She took care of us, that's for sure. And then I know she got into real estate. And then she went back to school, became a nurse. Yeah, started doing some pretty baller stuff at later age, like ACE dollar tests and all that. And now she's involved in the hospital of some sort. She was involved in cardiovascular. I ask her so many times what she does, and I'm sorry, Mom, that I can never remember exactly. I just know it's cool, and it's with the hospital. And
that's fucking hilarious. That's amazing. So they were late, like they both started later careers in their lives that are completely different than what they did until that point. And
yeah, for
that's
sure.
so interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so the reason I'm asking about them is because, so you said that you feel like there was a very big component of how they raised you guys to how you chose or grew into like maneuvering through the world. Do you believe that there's a possibility to do that even for people who didn't have great parents or a good upbringing? Do you think this is something that can, in later stages in life, just like your parents picked a different career later stages in life, do you think it's something that can be rewired later? Or do you think at a certain point it's just kind of like a lost cause?
Well, I'm definitely not somebody who would probably ever say lost cause. I'm definitely I'm an optimistic. I always look at the side of things more positive way, and it has been very difficult for me to
for you
give this everything's going to be okay message, because everything is okay. I mean, I personally am very lucky, and I know that. It's also hard for me to say, like, look yourself in the mirror and say that you're beautiful. It's like, yeah, but you're an international supermodel. Like, yeah, it's true.
So I don't know what to
say.
But
when I played football and I wasn't a model, I also decided to think that I was beautiful. Now, maybe that's a harder pill to swallow for most, just because maybe it's easier for me for whatever reason. But I do feel that everybody has the same opportunities every single moment of the day to feel whatever they want to feel and to be whatever they want to be. We're all blank slate. As the moment we wake up to every moment of the day, we are in charge even of what comes out of our mouth, what comes into our head, where we walk, clothes we put on. We are the creators of every single moment of our lives. So what you do with that is up to you. You know, I can't say what to do. I do know that there are practices of ways in which you can affirm who you are. If you're struggling, then wake up and practice every day telling yourself all the wonderful things that you need to hear from the world. Tell yourself that first, and the world will tell it to you second. If you don't have the love that you want, it's because you're not feeling the love inside of you. Now everyone's in different situations, and many are much rougher situations than I am in. And I have empathy and feel for those who aren't, potentially as lucky as me. But I still say, let's go. I also hurt like you hurt. I also feel like you feel. So as a team, as a community, let's wake up and feed ourselves with what we want to feed ourselves with. A lot of it, I think, is just lack of structure, lack of discipline, a lack of knowledge of even how to start your day. I mean, my practices come from reading books and having conversations. And also, I'm very lucky to have had not worked very much in 10 years. and I make a substantial amount of money for these limited days of work that I do. So I have a lot of time on my own, and I have dedicated that time to diving into myself as I would expect anybody else to do who has time. Like you need to get to know yourself. I'm doing it because I can, and hopefully because I'm doing this work for me, I can share maybe some instruction or guidance or love with others as to do my due diligence with what I'm given. I expect someone to do their due diligence with what they're given. Anything outside of it is just an excuse.
Well, sometimes from certain situations, it's just harder to get yourself up by your bootstraps, and it's kind of like it's a little bit more difficult to kind of take yourself off the ground, right? But I take your point that I think that structure and just showing up every day and trying to do this thing is the best strategy you can hope for, because as long as you're putting in the work, something will happen. Like something will basically occur that is in the right direction for you. And I do think that there's some people that are more lucky than others, and it's easier for them to make certain things happen. But in the end of the day, if those are the cards that you were dealt, whatever they are, there's almost always a thing you can do about it. I mean, aside from like a few very, very extreme situations of like, physical handicap, which like puts a very different kind of strain on the thing, or mental handicap, or honestly just being super unlucky with the conditions you were born into.
Yeah.
But I'm very glad that from the position that you find yourself in, because you could easily just choose to just enjoy that life without actually feeling any obligation to contribute anything to anybody else's life. Really, it's nowhere written that you have to do that, and you, for that reason or another, you chose to do that, and that's quite incredible. I really appreciate that quality about you. I would love to maybe even, because we're both going on a trip, it would be fun to link up and maybe even do like a recording from on the road. That would be dope.
Oh, done.
Like a little journal, like midway, kind of like was like, hey, let's pick this up. Let's see what actually happened there. Justice, there's a lot of things that I've picked up from just being around you as a person, that I've actually implemented to make my life better. I'm always seeking like those things, and I'm always noticing. But I've noticed that with you, it's more of a general tendency that you have to also try and allow for people in your environment to be able to express and absorb and grow and do all those things. So you talk the talk, but you definitely walk the walk. And I can attest to that personally. And that is a rare quality that you don't encounter a lot. You have some leaders that are very capable. But for the most part, I feel like there's a lot of shifty ground under most individuals who have the power to do certain things. And at least so far, with what I've noticed with you, is that you really are dedicated to build this better world that you're describing. And you also, you are trying to do the best to not, to be the best version of yourself in any given moment. And that is, it's somewhere, it's even comforting for me to know that, yes, people like you exist. It's not just like, the regular, what you hear on social media, people trying to tell you things in order to make themselves appear a certain way. Certain people actually care, even though they were lucky enough to not need to care. And that, I think, is a very big component of, if the world is to shift, we need more of those examples of people who can have the capacity, have the ability, and have the power to create certain environments, and they're the ones that will be able to allow for other individuals around them to feel safe enough to actually express themselves in a way that brings the better world. So I really thank you for that personally. Is there like a plug you want to make for the band? Like, is there like a website somewhere that people can find the band aside from the Instagram page that I'm actually going to link?
Oh, we have theThingsOfficial.com. There's two albums I would love for people to hear, and that's the Vicarious Catharsis, which is The Things, and then there's Ragdoll, which is the Zachary Murdoch album that just got released. And those are the two albums available from this place that no longer exists, which I found to be kind of fun. There'll be more music eventually that I will release.
What do you mean doesn't exist? Sorry,
the Skipper Room.
Oh yeah, but is it on the website? Is it on Spotify?
You can find Ragdoll on my own Instagram, on the little story underneath, or I don't know what you call highlights. It's called Ragdoll on Spotify. Both albums are on Spotify. And that comes from the Skip Room, comes from me. I produced and mixed them and also participated in them. And I would love for people to hear these records. Yeah, that'd be rad.
Oh, well, we'll leave all the links in the description, man.
Yeah, cool.
And I'll be very, very happy to do this again, especially if we're doing it from
the road. We'll do it on the freaking
really cool.
road. Yeah, we'll find a cool location.
Thank you.
On top of a mountain.
Oh, fuck yeah. Done. Yeah. I'm going to find the top of a mountain to do this shit.
Cool.
Thank you so much for doing this, brother.
Heck yeah, Danny. Mm-hmm.
Talking about pros and cons of Neurolink.
Sponsored by the people of the woods.
That's the right fucking...
The rebels.
So we stopped shooting and then we decided to pick this up because we had a really fun exchange about Neurolink in the future. And you said that even though you understand the pros, you still prefer to probably, at least in the beginning of this process, you prefer to maybe live in the woods. That'd be a good summation of your point.
You know what? I still think I'll go live in the woods. I will observe those who decide to become robots and see what that is like at the end of the day.
Well, okay, would there be any point in which you decided to join?
I would probably just have a guru Neuralink friend that has all the answers. And I'm like, don't tell me everything. I like this process of discovering. But if I have a question, I'll just go to my friend, Danny.
Oh, okay. So the concern was that you might know everything ahead of time?
I think my biggest concern is knowing, depending on how this Neuralink will work, I don't know too much about it. My understanding would be a computer, which we have access to all things in any given moment and as fast as possible. Up until this point, life's been such an adventure and such a journey of discovering things, and I know that it's not... There's no end goal, but once I have this end goal of everything, I'm afraid I'm going to be a bit bored.
But I don't think that's the shape.
Or bummed.
I see what you're saying, but I don't think it's possible. So like, even the fastest speed possible still obeys certain rules. Like,
so it'll always be faster.
No, and there's a limit to how fast it can be. You can't actually propagate everything that can be known immediately. That's impossible and that's impossible in principle. So there's something called the Bremerman's limit, which is calculation of how fast you can actually calculate things, like how fast a computer can make calculations, right? Sure, that takes into account the speed of light, like how matter works and how information propagates, information theory. And there's an actual formula that tells you exactly what is the maximum computable capacity, which is something, right? But obviously we're very far from reaching something like that. But even then, I feel that when civilization reaches the stage in which it starts playing with toys like things like Neuralink, which is connecting itself to what we call the internet, but what I believe is a universal property, which is like computation is a universal property. It's not something that we made, it's something we discovered. So it's essentially we allow our brains to embark into this new ocean of possibilities in a space that is actually real. We're just exploring it. Yeah. So in that regard, I think it's a whole new world of discovering. It's like, imagine types of experiences, types of qualia that we never even thought about, right? So like things that you experience with psychedelics, for example, there's like you said, the colors between the colors, right? There's certain things that you see them on psychedelics that you can't even say them in a regular language, right? So imagine a regular ability that will allow you to kind of see those like more extravagant types of experiences, and what kind of world and what kind of art and what kind of music you can create by being able to engage with that on a regular basis, while also being coherent and not like all like fucking fucked up and like, I don't know what's going on.
Do you think that you could be a genius musician or quicker because you have this ability to, like, maybe I need to understand a bit more what this Neurolink is doing.
Sure. And
does it allow for information and then now information played out through the human body, or is it more just knowledge based information storing and also sending out information, or can you transfer knowledge into doing, and if so, how quickly?
So that is actually an amazing question.
Thank you.
No, because most people don't think about that part. Like, for example, if you think in the Matrix, right, that little moment of I know Kung Fu, what it really means is that it's not like it uploaded Kung Fu into his brain. It's that it put him through the process of making all those movements in his experience inside many times, just like he would need to do during a regular life. It just accelerated it got closer to Bremerman's limit. So it's like it went faster, like making those moves inside his mind, but you can't just know Kung Fu. And that is actually something that we now know pretty accurately, like in principle, is something that Stephen Wolfram uttered as an idea and is part of his theory, which is computational irreducibility and the equivalence of computation, which means that there's certain processes that in order for you to know what happens next, certain things must happen first. So there's literally no way in principle, like this is like a law of nature, you can't actually know certain processes, the end of those processes, unless you go through them. So even in layman's terms, it would mean that even nature can't know certain outcomes until those histories unfolded fully. So that, I think that answers your question, which is like you would never get to a place in which everything is just known. I guess you would call that state God, right? If everything is known, that is how we conceive God, right? But I think that it would just accelerate our ability to make certain things more coherent and allow us to create structures that are based on the ability to capture and hold in your mind's eye things that are larger in time and in space. So for example, you couldn't do certain things until print was invented. Because until the moment that you could inculcate certain like libraries of things to remember them, like have them like step outside of the fallibility of the human mind, because we remember things poorly, and the people who can remember things perfectly are very rare and far in between, right? So you had to have some way in which you can transcribe what we thought about that thing and make it maybe not eternal, but more coherent, to more loyal to what it was originally. Like the second you laid it on a paper, unless the paper is destroyed, that thing is that thing, right? It doesn't change. So that way a lot of people can have access to this information in the middle, right? But then you had another development, which is the ability to communicate certain things. Like, so there's the physical manifestations of this thing, but then there's the cultural manifestations of this thing. So the scientific revolution, what was actually going on there is that you all of a sudden had this new idea that not everything is known, first of all. We can actually know new things, which to us it sounds arbitrary and obvious, but it wasn't back then. To think that you can know new things was unthinkable. For most people, for most history. And that idea, you can think of that idea as a technology. That idea opened the door to try to know new things, because now a lot of people think, oh, I can know new things, so let me try know new things. And now we take it for granted. So those kind of things made it possible to then agree that you can try and do all these things and you can make them happen in a way that will construct a new structure. That, for example, so the reason I started saying about writing or print and specifically, calculators originally were rooms of women that would sit and like calculate all those like very tedious mathematical tasks, and you would have a whole room of them working at the same time to make sure that the majority of them, when they reach a certain conclusion, then that will be your result, because statistically that means that more likely than not that's the correct answer, because you have like 20 or 30 or 100 of them, right? Those were the original calculators. So now all of a sudden you can hold it in your hand, it's in your phone, right? We know they don't make mistakes. How do we know that? Well, it's a certain thing about, arithmetic and computation, but the point is that up until the point where you all of a sudden had this idea, and therefore the attempt to build a technology that can inculcate this thing that all those women were doing in one room, and you can just do it in like a process and an algorithm that can do that. That was a thing that all of a sudden opened the door to everything the computers do, which is the crazy graphics, like everything you can possibly. Our entire world is possible only due to that fact alone, that you allowed for that possibility. Now, if 80 years ago, somebody before this whole thing came out, luckily back then there was not enough, there was no internet, so not enough people even knew that anything like this existed. It was just kind of like worked around in very small closed circles, basically. Even when IBM was created, not a lot of people knew what they were doing. They just knew they were getting those like final products. But if we would have this conversation 80 years ago or 60 years ago, and we would talk about computation this way, you would say like, but imagine what it would do. Like, it would open the world to like anybody can do anything, and you can have like people hiding behind false identities and trying to hack into other but the good that it gave the world, the infrastructure that it created for. Now, there's some reasons to believe that this might be different this time, simply because the type of change that it might bring might actually be equivalent to a nuclear holocaust. Because if we do something wrong now, we can actually probably, so in that regard, I actually think you're right. So if we do it the wrong way, there is every bit of possibility that we might actually not survive this. If something with that much power will all of a sudden take off in a way that we didn't expect and start doing things we didn't want, that's, by the way, the reason that one of the main reasons that Elon Musk is doing Neurolink is to combat that specifically. It's called the runaway problem, which is like, we want to make sure that whatever it is, AI is going to be created for sure. What he's trying to make sure, and this is kind of like our insurance policy, that when it starts taking off into this weird space of infinite possibilities, we want to be attached to it somehow. Because if we're not, we'll become so irrelevant as to be completely squashable. Like, we're just going to become... But this thing, whatever it is, would still do work in the world. Like, it would still evolve into do something in the world. And if it decides that it wants to build those machines for whatever reasons it decides to do, and we have no handle on it, like we have no place in which we do any decision making, that's the end for us. It's not even that it's going to try and destroy us. It's that at that point, we're just like a colony of ants. And if we happen to be in the way, we'll be squashed. So that's really why, actually, what Neuralink is actually the opposite of how a lot of people perceive that part of the progress, is because it tries to potentially help us have some handle on this crazy process that is about to take place. And that process is, you can't stop it. Like, it's unstoppable. Like, it's going to happen that way or another. I guess that's kind of like the larger argument here. Yeah.
Where do you think we're all going so fast?
it's not about going fast. I think that it's about so if you like, the way that I see it is that there's only one thing that was evolving since the beginning of the universe.
Okay.
And that is information. So information in the form of the laws of physics, then information in the laws of chemistry. So like, it's different bonds of possible connections that can occur in a world, in a universe, right? Later, the chemical bonds led somehow to organic bonds, single cell, multi-cell, yada, 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 until it got to us through many, many evolutions, right? It got to a point of your brain. Now your brain is doing another thing. Like, it's doing something beyond just being biological. Human brain seems to be doing this extra thing, which is like the thing that gets you music, by the way, right? Monkeys can't make music as beautiful as you can, right?
Thank you.
Now, yeah, you're welcome. In comparison to monkeys, your music is incredible.
Love that.
Yeah, even though there are some
Quote you
monkey
on
bands
that.
that I love to fall asleep to, mostly macaques. But if you look at that this way, if you try and like divorce yourself from the bias of meat and just look at it from the most like out perspective you can possibly look at it, this is the same process that is taking place from the beginning of time. And we just happen to be, at least in this corner of the universe, to the extent that we know, we seem to be kind of like the pinnacle of that, of the culmination of everything this process is capable of. So your brain, my brain, they're derivatives, they're expressions of this, at the moment, final product so far of this informational evolution and what it's capable of doing, right? But that process that goes in your brain is the one that gives rise to computers and discovery of computation and everything that is possible, that it makes possible. So there's no reason to think why that's not part of the natural process. That process is trying to evolve into a faster medium. So that's why we're moving faster. And I think that that's another way in which I feel like the Neurolink might actually remedy a lot of this problem, is that at the moment, and this is something that, again, Elon Musk himself expressed, and I think it's a brilliant way of thinking about it, which is that it might be the case that the reason that the social media and all that stuff drives us crazy is not because of what it is, but because of a complete uneven ground between how much input and how much output you're capable of putting out there. So you're getting it through a visual field, which is a lot of information at once, but the only recourse you have to respond is like two thumbs, or maybe both hands, like on a keyboard, right? That's the fastest you can go, right? So imagine somebody just talking at you ad nauseum, just like unloads, right? That's what the internet is doing, and then you barely get to respond. So it creates stress, and then it creates stress on a massive scale. But what if you even the ground? What if you can actually respond as fast as you're getting the information, and also you have more control over how much of it you actually can comprehend at once? So it doesn't like get your attention all scrambled and crazy, but you can actually hold all of it in view and actually comprehend all of it, encompass all of it without getting like too distracted and crazy. Maybe even at the same time, you can do work. Like you can literally do that and do work. Let's say that gives you that capability, right? And you get to respond to all the things that you feel like you need to respond. So there's like a more natural, even flow of information. So at that point, it's not going to feel that fast to you. It's just you're going to come up to the speed of it, and it's not going to feel like you're rushing. It's just going to be your natural speed. So all the stress goes out the window. Now, obviously, that's kind of like a, best case scenario.
What you just described sounds stressful.
What?
What you just described sounds stressful.
Because you're looking at it from the perspective of what you're capable of doing now.
For sure.
Yeah. But that will be my answer to what's the rush. It's not that it's a rush. It's that we're entering a space in which you're getting into this informational flow that is like starting to go into this crazy current, and you can feel the current, but you don't know how to swim that fast yet. So that might be, now again, what I'm saying right now is just kind of like the ideal version of what it might be. It might go completely off the rails. That's on the table.
Right.
100%. But all I'm saying is that you could have the same conversation 80 years ago about everything that developed. And by the way, just so you know, it was very common to talk this way about books when they came out, because people were afraid that it's going to take away from the bond
Storytelling?
Yeah. They was like, oh, so everybody is just going to sit with their books? I was like, yeah. And now we think of books as like the,
Nice topic.
The what?
That's a nice topic to discuss.
What is?
The books. Everyone's going to be sitting there with their books and not telling me the story. That's pretty funny. Yeah, I could see the correlation between, the dilemmas between every evolution or a big evolution, and especially in terms of technology. I guess my next question is, well, then what's next? And then what's next? And then what's...
So there's a, oh my God, this is like, you're going to hear Kelsey laughing because it's like, I can't not recommend this book because I'm just like, I find all those questions, they're just like, I honestly, at this point, I see it as like the Bible for the 21st century. Like everybody should read this book. It's called The Beginning of Infinity by David Deutsch. It touches on all those things in such a brilliant and simple to understand way. And I guess the short version of it would be, knowledge is a form of information that can do work. It's an actual informational structure that can do work. Anywhere you have knowledge, which is like a type of information that can tell you how to do something, or it will move something to do something, right? It's an actual thing. It's a force of nature. It's not a thing that humans make. It's a thing that runs humans, but it also runs many other things. So we just happen to be just one sector of where knowledge touches upon the world, right? And we is what he calls universal explainers and universal constructors, which is like things that remain their shape, but they can actually also take other things and make them into new things without losing their shape. That's what the definition of a constructor is, right? It retains its shape and it can make new things. So we're universal constructors. We reach the level of what he calls a universal constructor. We can build anything that is physically possible. It doesn't mean that we can build it now. It means that potentially, the way we're constructed now, we can actually, if we just keep going, we can build anything that is physically possible, according to the laws of physics. Why does it matter? Because you asked, okay, what's next and what's next? Yeah, you're always going to have this horizon beyond which you can't see because of the irreducibility of computation, because there's certain processes that simply have to take place in order for you to know what the next actually entails. You can't know beyond a certain horizon. According to what he says in the book, and I fully agree with that, the thing that a civilization can strive for is the optimal bubble of knowledge that allows for a fast enough processing of new situations right at the horizon, or beyond which you can't see, and being able to constructively absorb whatever it brings without it destroying it fast enough. So, and the more advanced a civilization is, the less things in the universe can potentially destroy it, because it can like a meteor would be like a very small scale example of that. Like a meteor is a difficult problem, but it's not as difficult as a neutron star, a neutron supernova exploding around us, right? There'll be a way bigger problem. So now we can't even begin to comprehend how you can possibly combat a supernova. It doesn't seem possible from where we're sitting right now, but we already can see technologically how we can potentially handle a meteor, right? Or the sun becoming a red giant. So we just move on, kind of thing. But eventually, a civilization gets to a point in which even problems they couldn't possibly conceive of, that they've never seen before, would still be encapsulated in that bubble that they've created, because their bubble is big enough now that the horizon to which they can see is pretty big, and their technological sophistication is so great that no matter how crazy that new thing is that just came out of the horizon, they'll be able to handle it. And that civilization becomes eternal. So that's kind of like the largest. And by the way, I want to say to that, and it's a lot of the stuff that I told you that I connect with the way that you're doing things, came from my understanding, actually from that book, that if what he's saying is true, which I absolutely believe is completely true, it's only a matter of time before we become the dominant force in the galaxy. So it's like right now we're completely insignificant. Almost anything can wipe us out, right? We will get to a point where all of a sudden, and it's exponential, so it's going to look like we're insignificant, poof, we're like all of a sudden we're everywhere, right? So at that point, we think about this, like this table, the mics, music, like everything in this world, almost all of it was in somebody's head at a certain point, right? So ideas became a real thing in the world, right? So a civilization that has the power to traverse through the galaxy and expand into the galaxy would literally paint the galaxy with its imagination. The galaxy would take the form of whatever vibe that civilization brought. If it's an evil civilization, it would become this menacing, crazy place because that's what they want to bring into the world. So in that regard, that's the place I'm coming from when I'm telling you that I think that the rootedness that you keep talking about, the community, the understanding of like the sacred quality of the present moment, all that stuff, it has to be integrated well enough into a civilization that has those technological capabilities. Because then you really have heaven spreading through the universe. Because if you have a heaven aiming civilization that can do those things, it would take heaven with it, and vice versa. So even in the grandest of like pictures, I think that the quality and the importance of your life's mission is so great, because you have to be able to understand these roots to reach, you would say the sky, but in this case, the universe.
Yeah, on planet Zoron, you gotta have a community of, gotta be able to maintain interactions. But if you have the hyperlink or Neurolink, I don't know, man. 'Cause I don't know if my rule books will hang.
I think I don't know if you understand what kind of music you'll be able to create, man. Honestly.
Well, I don't know either, but I think it's fascinating. I also question, like, okay, well, do we eventually go into a way of interacting with technology that allows us to continue to rebirth and regenerate to always keep us alive?
And healthy. Not just alive like 90, but like alive like we are now, or maybe even 26 or 27.
Like what? Like always?
Maybe even grow younger. That's actually not that far away from possibility
I've
anymore.
heard a few things, and I'm thinking to myself a few things about that concept. First thoughts are, well, what about dying? What if dying is a certain rite of passage? What if that is necessary for us all?
What if it's the ultimate evil that convinced you that you should do it?
Well, it wouldn't do much convincing, because naturally it just kind of happens.
But that's what I'm saying. No, it convinced you that you shouldn't try and overcome it. A lot of people would say that death is the ultimate disease. We're trying to eradicate disease, don't we? Because we're trying to bring quality of life. So like death is not... There's a really good video by... I'm going to put a link because I'm terrible with names. But this guy, he has a really cool YouTube channel. And he tells this story, which I don't think it's his story. I think he just basically retells it with like a cool animation. But it's a story about a dragon. And the dragon is basically terrorizing the village. And every, once in a while it just takes somebody, like it always takes the people. Like eventually all the people die due to the dragon, some form or another. And some people eventually get sick of it and they start, thinking of ways of getting rid of the dragon and killing the dragon. And then you have this entire movement of people saying like, no, you shouldn't try and do that because then it's going to, create like a bigger problem, whatever it is. It's like, so essentially equates it to death, right?
Yeah.
So, because if you think about it, like you can still kill yourself, or you can choose not to keep doing the thing that extends your life. And it's not like somebody's giving you a life sentence in that regard, right? It's like, but if you can keep going on, I don't see any reason why. Like imagine the amount of wisdom. If you maintain your mental faculties and you're not just like becoming like a complete, degenerate, then you are still contributing to society and you keep gaining experience. Imagine the type of wisdom you're going to have in 500 years or 1,000 years, or it's, you know, it's unfathomable. Like the amount of knowledge one person stores from like life experiences and things like that. As long as you can keep actually like interacting with it and like really keep, you can't, like, to me, that possibility is incredible. So now it's funny because actually Elon Musk is one of those people that are, in that regard, he's in your camp, because he's saying that, you know, at a certain point, old ideas need to die, and usually people don't change their minds, they just die. So at a certain point, you need people to die so old ideas die. But I think that the faulty with that argument is that the reason that they insist on things too much towards the end of their lives is because their mental capacity becomes much more limited. So they're much more rigid in their thinking. And if you can solve that, then they're not going to be so rigid with their thinking. So, you know, that's kind of like I don't know. I think it's a matter of preference, obviously.
For sure.
I fall on the side of like, I want to live as long as I possibly can. And if I don't feel like doing that anymore, I'll just stop doing whatever this thing is. It's not like you're going to have a magic pill and just like, you're cured from death forever.
You'll have a switch on the wall. Don't touch this.
Don't touch this red switch.
Don't touch the red switch.
Yeah, I think in the end, it's all a matter of like not knowing enough about whatever it is.
Oh, for sure. I mean, even death alone, like I'm curious enough to die. Then I am curious enough to keep living, because I'm alive and I'm getting to live and I'm having a lot of fun.
So you're saying you're accepting whatever it is?
I accept my curiosity to experience what comes after I leave my body. Just if one knew more about that part, then we'd understand a bit more like, oh, death is not defined as an end. It's actually potentially now stepping into even more wisdom. We don't really know.
I'm open to that.
Which is like that's really it. Like, I think there's a fear of dying and definition around dying that drives us to say, oh, I'd like to live longer, because we don't really know what happens.
Yeah. So you're kind of placing your bet on something that you don't really know, right?
Like I wouldn't mind living 200 years than dying. You know, it's just like, I do think it's possible that we could live longer in general, but I think there's just a matter of diet and atmosphere and environment and stresses that maybe cause a shorter lifespan. I think there may be an evolved way of living that allows our lives to be a bit more expansive and also a bit more healthy. But at some point, I think there'll just be like, let's see what's on the other side.
What if we can bring some of that other side back here while we're alive? What if we discover what that other side is and we learn how to actually traverse between those grounds without dying?
Psychonauts. We got to kill him. And then you got to come back to life and tell us everything.
There's a movie called Flatliners, which is exactly...
I remember that movie. That's a cool freaking movie.
I didn't
Cutting
see
it close. You should see that.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it's cool. I remember they're freaking out because they stayed dead too long.
That fucking death. Would you stay there too long? No, it's.
So yeah, I mean, that's the ultimate question. And there are people who have had near death or death experiences that come back and say all kinds of stuff. But I guess one won't know unless you go for it, you know, and we have no choice.
Or you figure out what this place is.
Figure it out and say, ain't for me. I'm going to stick around.
You're just like, oh, I don't want to go. Well, it's one way.
It's a one-way ticket.
That's the problem there. Yeah. It's a one-way ticket at the moment.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So it's like, but I think in the end, it's like, I think accepting whatever it is that is actually happening has a much greater value than what most of the Western scientifically oriented world wants to admit. I think that it would behoove us to be more mindful, literally, towards what the East had to say about what's possible in this world. So like, I actually think that the adoption of meditation and the ability to connect to the present moment in different ways is something that we really have to take more seriously, and not just as Sam Harris calls it, an executive stress ball. Like you don't want to just think of it in terms of like it's something that people do to calm themselves down. I think it's something that more people should take more seriously, because it truly reveals something that is true about the human condition, the human experience. And as annoying as it might sound, because, as annoying as it might sound, it is true to say that certain truths can only be known by going through them, like through actually observing and experiencing them. There's certain things that are not expressible in mere English or in any language, really. So in that regard, I think people should really devote themselves to a lot of the stuff that, even though you don't necessarily express that in that way, it sounds to me what you're describing is very Buddhist in its core, which is like being accepting of the present moment, tending to your immediate environment and the people around you. And I mean, that's, what else can you ask for? That's the ethical life, right?
At the core of it, you know, and I know the culture is one that prepares for dying, so that in those moments, it's the transfer, a mindful transfer. Or like maybe, I think I've heard it in that culture, it's just you're born to prepare to leave into the next chapter of life, where, let's say, this life you were training to be a bit more advanced, to potentially transferred into the next lifetime of being a bit more advanced, and then maybe a bit more advanced. Or if you don't live it out right, you kind of return as that little ant you squashed in your kitchen in 1992, just because it was getting on your mangoes. I don't know. I hope that's not the case, because I have a lot of ant lives to live. I did stop killing living things, but it doesn't mean I didn't take some lives when I was a kid. So it's a lot of different ideas and a lot of different even thoughts on what comes next. Even like we were talking about earlier, like a heaven place for those who believe this. The Buddhist way of reincarnating into another cycle of learning if you haven't learned what you need to learn. Or, there's other cultures of thinking different things,
or maybe doing it in this lifetime. So like reincarnating still in this lifetime and giving yourself the opportunity to learn in this lifetime still.
Yeah, still.
Yeah.
I mean, I do feel that I have been a part of a cycle of living different lives. Honestly, because I feel like I chose to. I feel like it's just fun. And wherever I've come from, or whatever that runs this thing, what's running you, it's running that, the matrix, if you will. I feel like there is just this idea of this journey of experiencing the whole creation and the fun of it all, like a kind of a free for all play world, where it's like, well, it's only so much fun until we get to play the game. I feel like we've created this environment, this game to play with each other just for the sake of experiencing how awesome our own creations have been. And we get to experience each other's different personalities, or else it would be really boring. If we were all the exact same thing. No, we needed to be different. And so there's also likelihood that we've created this whole cycle of enjoyment that looks like this. And then here comes another one. And it's just this.
What do you mean? Like what cycle of enjoyment?
Let's say let's say I'm one with creator. I am creator. And I've created all things.
Okay. Thanks, man.
You're very welcome.
I appreciate it.
And I'm bored. I created all things. But what is not created is maybe many things, experiencing the many things that are just really awesome.
So you're saying that our experiences are unique and new even to God? Like God could not have inspect those experiences.
Well, I think that's maybe beauty.
Well, maybe that's the point of us to him, her, it, that we can experience things, he can experience things through us that were never experienced before.
Right. We are kind of the test rats, if you will, of experiencing and evolving. And if I were creator, I would not create all things that I already know, except for maybe something that can evolve in front of me that I receive joy from to watch grow in front of me, especially if it's all aware of and of itself in this cycle and journey. It's I think it's a bit more sweet when it's just even free will to do what we please. That allows, I think, that connection, that acknowledgement of source or where we come from to be a bit more special. And then we just, I don't know, I just kind of feel this one presence that experiences in many different ways, all because it's just, we can, and it's possible.
So I like that image. So you're saying that instead of it being a picture of utility in that, like, because I always say if God would have known everything there is possible to ever know, then existence would be pointless. Like, it already knows it, so what's the point of everything unfolding? But I like your image in which it's not necessarily a utility thing. It's more like a gardening tending to his garden, because it's just there's a balance there. There's an interesting there's a communal component. There's just like this you help the plant grow, and there's some things that maybe you're benefiting back, but you're not doing it to only benefit from the flower or from the fruit. You're actually doing it in a way that the process of tending to it actually allows for an experience that is very positive and, like you said, a little more sweet. I like that. That's a really cool image.
Yeah.
I see this like giant God Buddha just like tending to his like, multiverses and like fucking putting some little a bit too much water there. Sorry.
Yeah. I think there's a bit more personality in it all, a bit more humor, and take it a bit too serious.
There's definitely humor in it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think so too. Just life in general, I do think we're just allowed to have a bit more fun, allowed to explore, allowed to evolve, and see what happens, and not take it so serious. I think we get caught up on like the seriousness of things. It's like, we're here to play and have fun and love each other. Now, if you're not doing those things, then, well, I'm not a fan of you. But you can go over there and do that, I guess. But I think there is this, remembering of like, oh yeah, we're here. We chose to be here. We're here to experience. We're here to connect. And when we're all connecting and experiencing, there's just a bit more of you can feel it. It's just something feels a bit nicer in the air around us, where it feels like, oh, connected. We're connected. And that connection feels outside of, it feels outside of me, but also it's very much inside of me. And I go back and forth of like, okay, wanting to connect with God, but I also don't put God as something that's separate from me. I like to say that I am, I won't say I am God necessarily, but I am the very thing that was created and created. Like, I'm a part of this one thing, as are you, as are you, as are you. So in essence, we are created very similarly in the sense that we're all experiencing this journey in different ways.
So is it the unity of that idea that you like?
There's a unity, it feels, where it's like, okay, well, I am creator of every moment. And I think we need to own that a bit more and stop acting like we're just these helpless human beings. Like, no, we are creators.
Oh, I 100%
of everything around us.
Yeah. Responsibility.
Yeah. And also a bit of gratitude. Thanks for this gift. It's like we are the fruits and branches of a bigger tree. Now, there's no fruits and branches if it isn't for the roots, isn't for the tree trunk. So the tree isn't as spectacular if all the fruit and all the branches weren't a part of this tree. there's something else, and we are the experience of, oh, I can taste the fruit, I can see and smell the flower, oh, it's awesome, but this tree and the roots grow very deep, and without this whole thing, this whole system, this fruit and this flower would not be existing. So like it's like we are expressions of God in its fun, exciting ways, and also sad, disgusting, evil ways. Like you can't take these aspects of God and like it, but and not look and not also like these aspects of God, Creator, because it's all in one beautiful experience. You know, you can pick and choose. It's all for one kind of thing, I think.
I love that image.
Yeah,
that's a really beautiful image, actually, and I agree with, I think, everything you just said. I think the roots have like the connection to the roots has to be in place in order to grow tall, and the taller you're trying to go, the more you have to be rooted in the ground. The more you have to have this connection. Otherwise, you're gonna fall over. And I think that's actually a perfect analogy, probably.
Yeah, it's nice.
What do you say to people that are more serious in their attitudes, but they're driven through their pain to, let's say, remedy a disease? Let's say they're a researcher and their mother and father died because of this disease. So now they've adopted this very serious manner. So they don't run around and play and have fun like you were suggesting. They don't know how, or maybe they forgot, or maybe they need to be reminded. But for whatever reason, they can't do that. But that pain drives them to seek and maybe find a cure for a disease that cures millions and billions of people.
Yeah.
You don't think that has a place, like in the way that we comport ourselves in the world?
Well, I guess I have to look at how pain interacts with the individual, and how that runs their life. Now, I understand that there's pain. What we do with that pain is just up to each person, because pain can be turned into joy, it can be turned into gratitude, it can be turned into anything. It can also be felt and appreciated as a certain characteristic of life and God, if we will, that a lot can come from. Now, if you live an entire life and this pain has now become your God, and you are now slave to pain, and this is your life, well, much is appreciated over the pain being the catalyst for this cure. But I also would say, well, is there another way to utilize this pain as a drive to create, but then and then try to, with discipline even and practice, take that pain and be grateful, just shift it. And it all depends on the individual. Maybe not every individual wants to be happy. I assume that we all, human beings, want ultimately the same kind of feeling, because through observation, through just looking and talking to people around me, we want love, companionship, communication. We want to feel connected. I don't think anybody consciously loves to embody hate all the time. I haven't met everyone in the world, and I know sometimes people do embody hate and very dark things and evil things that harm other people. But I think ultimately at the core, everybody wants to experience the same kind of thing. And there are words to describe it, but I think there's just a flow where all the things that feel good about being alive, it's nice to experience that all around us. And we give that characteristic, we give names to that. We give it love, joy, happiness, freedom. But we also got to make room for the complete opposite.
Yeah, but also I just thought of it, like maybe the job of the ones that are either more well off emotionally, or the ones that weren't great emotionally but found a way out. Maybe the job for those people, especially entertainers and musicians, the people who get to touch many people with what they create, maybe their job is to actually help others alleviate that pain to the extent that it's possible.
Yeah.
And maybe that's why so many people enjoy music. Maybe that researcher really enjoys a certain kind of music that really pulls them out of that darkness when they really need to, right? So I guess in that regard, this is where the two worlds kind of interact, where the joy tries to kind of interact with the sad moment, and it gives rise to this like moment of catharsis or release.
Yeah,
it's like this collision between the saddest and the most elated, I guess.
Yeah, and it's interesting, and I find it interesting to even say it, but there's beauty in all things. There's beauty in the depths of sadness. There's beauty in the depths of love, and there's beauty in the depths of pain. There's beauty in the depths of health. You can't have one without the other, right? So we would not know the goodness of love if we didn't know the goodness of its complete opposite. How else would we have it to measure against? You can't just have this without being aware of that.
Yeah, the contrast will always be there. I'm not 100% sure that in order to enjoy something, you actually have to suffer. I don't know if that's true. Like, I know that that's something that...
Well, would you know what it feels like not to suffer if you didn't have suffering?
Yes, because I think that when you in true serenity, or in true, like a truly blissful state, you're not enjoying it because you're not suffering.
True.
You're enjoying it because you're enjoying it. So in that regard, I think it's completely isolated. But I do agree with the statement that it's all part of creation, however you want to frame it, right? It all exists, and therefore it's all available to interact with. So it must have some. Well, must is a hard word here, because a lot of philosophers will push back and say, well, what if nothing has a reason? Okay, fair enough. But to the extent that we can postulate reasons, right?
Yeah.
If it exists, it has to have some kind of a functional utility to some extent, even if it's one of like putting fire under your ass to do things.
Yeah.
Right? The not wanting to be in pain is definitely a very good. It's a very good fuel to do things. Like it really makes you want to get to that thing, so you don't have to suffer. In that regard, that's absolutely true. It's a good motivator, for sure.
For sure. Do you think you brought a thought up. So do you think that there's a natural state of being when we remove our own maybe patterns that bring in, limitations to distractions, through pains and sufferings, all the noise that cause us to maybe get off balance? Is there a state of being that we are supposed to naturally be in with ourselves and each other?
That is a very difficult question. I think the Buddhism would answer that question in the form that when you reach such a state, you realize that none of it really matters. And because of that none of it really matterness, you fall into the most natural position, which is just acting according to what needs to be done, instead of acting out of a place of reaction to how you want things to be done. And there's a distinction there, because understanding what really is one thing, and seeing things through how most of us see the reality most of the time, which is what we think it is. Now, it's a very difficult thing to explain with words if you haven't experienced states that are close to that. But some of us have this feeling, sometimes haphazardly, when we just watch TV or just stare at a wall. But the feeling is, you know how sometimes you would sit on the couch and out of nowhere you would all of a sudden, it just dawns on you. It's just kind of like, it's almost like it just descends from above, and it's almost like this feeling of like, it's all good. Mm-hmm. Like everything is exactly where it needs to be. Did you ever have this feeling?
Yeah, there's a few times where I just kind of feel.
But it's rare, right?
Yeah.
Like truly, like you just. That's what it is.
Yeah.
That's the bullseye of the mandala. So essentially in all the practices of of meditation, the way I understand it, is to reach a state in which that is almost like second nature to you. But according to those traditions, they try to reach it from different perspectives. Actually, that's not entirely true, because Vipassana is more about trying to transcend that as well. But that's a whole other conversation. I don't fully agree with that. But for example, in Dzogchen, the goal is to have the experience that there is no self. They basically guide you to this place where you trying to experience the fact. There's this phrase, for example, that is keep being repeated, which is, there's no one here that all of this is happening to. And they just keep saying it. There's no one here that all of this is happening to. And at first you hear this sentence and you think, well, this is just some kind of, mysterious way of looking at it. I get it. I get what they're trying to do. But the more you practice, all of a sudden it starts creeping up on you, which is, oh no, this is not a metaphor. This is not a way of saying things. This is true. There's no one here that all of this is happening to. So there's just experience. The me is a construct. Now, we understand it with language, but it's a different thing to embody that experience, to fully have like this just experience. Now, I've had it a couple of times, not for long, but it's, I think I described it before in the podcast. One of the most outstanding things about it is how non-outstanding it is. It's like, it's just so matter of fact. Just like that feeling, this gesture you did with your hands, it's exactly what it is. That's how I know you know what I mean. It's just this like kind of like this perfect, like nothing needs to be added. Yeah, you don't even have to say anything.
Yeah.
Don't worry. It's almost like the world is like, relax. I got this. It's all good, right?
Yeah.
So it's that, but the I got this is just a second thing here. It comes from realizing that there's no one to defend, there's no one to get hurt, there's no one here that all of this is happening to. So it's just happening. And when you embody that, a whole new world of experience opens up to you. And I would say that would be the closest to me being able to perceive a state that is that natural. Now, it's a lot of work to try and get to that state more often than not. Because most of the time we're just locked in our heads thinking that we're poor little me doing this thing, didn't go my way, and again, some people are a little bit more committed and advanced towards like, understanding the world from a perspective of gratitude and trying to help others. And that brings you closer to that place. But I would say that is the closest to like a natural state, which is understanding how things really are, which requires a lot of work of trying to really pay attention to what is actually happening right now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And what is not happening.
And what is not happening, yeah.
I like that, just the remove of self and identity. Take that all away and everything is just happening.
There's no one to blame.
Yeah.
Because there's no one here that all this is happening to. No matter what, you can always circle back to that.
Sure.
See what I mean?
There's no one here this is happening
all of this is happening to. But it's they keep just repeating it. There's a lot of little tricks like that. So they for hours they would sit, and I think this is actually more Zen. This is not Dzogchen, but in Zen they would raise their hand. Actually, I'm not sure. Somebody's going to yell at me on YouTube, but whatever. I think I'm right. But they would basically, do gestures. Like they would raise their arm, and they won't say, "I'm raising my arm." They would just keep repeating, "Arm is being raised. Arm is being lowered," and they keep doing that until it hits you. It's like you, the thing you call me, have no idea how you're doing this. How is this happening? Like, do it and then try and think, like, how is this happening? You just kind of will it, but how is it going up? Like,
yeah, for sure.
You, the thing you feel yourself, you're not
I'm not
doing
even thinking
this.
about it.
Yeah. How is this happening? Right? So when you do that enough, all of a sudden it starts to kind of pop like more and more. You're like, whoa, like there's no one here that all this is happening to. And that's very, very liberating. There's another trick that I heard actually Sam Harris talk about this, and I tried it, and that's the one that worked for me the most before I started doing Vipassana more seriously. And obviously hours of meditation would definitely help you to get there faster. But before I did that, one of the tricks, it's taken from the idea is much older, but he was talking about it in the context of a book called On Having No Head. And the idea there, the central idea is that you basically place your attention on an object, preferably something natural, like a tree or like, for example, this plant. And then you drive your attention back into where you believe the source is. So it's almost like, not the source, I mean like the source of attention, like you, right? But it's important that you don't frame it as me, but just kind of ask yourself, like it's a very, very subtle gesture, and you just ask yourself, who is looking, right? And usually if you just think of that concept with words, you say, who is looking, even though you're not saying it, you're kind of thinking like, what do you mean? Like me, like me, I'm looking, but that's conceptual. So if you really pay attention, when you try to do this thing, you basically just look at the object and you hold it in view, and then you try and, while you're looking at it, it's almost like you're looking at the air in between you and it, but not really. You're looking at where you believe the attention is towards it. So it's like the thing you feel attention, it's almost like you're twisting back and you're trying to like look back at yourself through looking at that object. Essentially, you're trying to kind of like do this like shift of like trying to find where's that I that I believe is looking at this. And you keep doing that. Like it's momentary. It's not supposed to be something that you do for a while. So if it doesn't happen immediately, you just reframe, do it again. It's almost like immediate. And if you do this enough, all of a sudden something will happen. It's almost like the matrix jams for a second, and you're like, and you're like, whoa. Like all of a sudden it kind of snaps you out of it. You're like, I can't find the thing I thought I was. Like you think you're here, right? But then where here? Is it in here? It feels like it's behind my eyes, right? But where? Where exactly? And then you keep trying to find it. Yeah, you're like, where exactly is it? And then eventually you discover, and this is according to like the central idea in the book, is that eventually you get to a very conclusive place where you completely eradicated all the possible places where you thought it might be and you didn't find it. So you conclusively land on the understanding that it's actually not there. It's nowhere. There's nowhere that you, this I, are. It's just like, it's a fucking mind
sentence.
Yeah, IR baboon.
Yeah.
No, it's like that shit is a fucking mind fuck. That's why I really want you to do a fucking retreat, man.
Yeah.
We should talk about that after, because there's a few, components that are like, but you should definitely like make an effort and go to one of those, I think. Yeah. Especially if you're going to travel the US right now. I think there's like a tremendous benefit in doing one of those, especially now. I feel like it's right.
Cool.
Yeah.
Maybe not like next month. I'll do something else first.
Well, it's 10 days.
10 days. Cool with that.
All right, brother. So I thank you for this extra little time.
Extra snidbit.
Yeah. That was awesome.
After hours.
I like that.
Coming up next.
Yeah. Dope.